Good afternoon. My name is Dee Oliver, and I'm the chair of the Planning Commission, and I'd like to welcome you all to the August 12th, 2020 Planning Commission formal meeting. We're going to start today with, I've asked Commissioner Inman to lead us in prayer, and that the pledge is going to be followed and led by Commissioner Klein.
Bow our heads. Heavenly Father, we come to you today thanking you for your guidance and wisdom. As we begin this hearing today, guide our hearts and our minds in the spirit of fairness, right thought, and speech. Help us to remember our responsibility to serve our community with great insight, guided by understanding, wisdom, and respect for all. As we make decisions today, help us to promote the common good as we work together for the betterment of our great city. As trusted servants, we seek blessings on our deliberations and on our efforts here today. Amen.
Commissioner Klein?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. I can ask Commissioner Graham to introduce the members of our commissioner, please.
To my left is George Alcarez. He represents the Beach District. George is a building contractor. He's also the GM of the ECSC, which is coming up in just, 2 weeks?
2 weeks, I think.
2 weeks, yeah. To the left of him is Don Horsley. Don is at large, and he is a farmer. And then we have Dee Oliver, the chairwoman, and she is at large, and she's a funeral director. And then David Weiner, Council District, commercial sales. Mike Inman, he's at large. He's an attorney. And then David Redman from the Bayside District, commercial real estate. And then Robin Klein, with Centerville District or Borough, social worker. And I'm Whitney Graham, and I represent the Lynn Haven District, and I'm a real estate developer.
Great, thank you. And our planning director, Bobby DeHaan, if you will take time to introduce the planning staff, please.
Thank you, Madam Chair. First, starting with, on my right, the Deputy City Attorney, Kay Wilson. Starting with planning staff up at the seats is Jonathan Sanders, Marshall Coleman, Bill Landfair, Zoning Administrator Kevin Kemp, Waddell, Planning Administrator Carolyn Smith, and potentially a number of other, and the Housing Program Administrator Karen Porcello in the back.
Thank you. And I think that Mr. Landfair, if you'll read the rules, please.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Today's meeting is being held both virtually and in person in order to comply with proper social distancing guidelines. The Virginia Beach Planning Commission takes pride in being fair and courteous to all parties in attendance. It is important that all involved understand how the Commission normally conducts its meetings. It is equally important that everyone treat each other and the members of the Commission with respect and civility. The Commission requests that if you have a cell phone, please either silence it or turn it off while in the chamber. This is an abbreviated explanation of the rules. The complete set of rules is located in the front of the Planning Commission agenda. Following is the order of business for this public hearing. Withdrawals and deferrals. The chairman will ask if there are any requests to withdraw or defer an item on the agenda. Consideration of these requests will be made first. Consent agenda. The second order of business is the consideration of the consent agenda, which are those items that the Planning Commission believe are unopposed and which have favorable staff recommendation. Regular agenda. The Commission will then proceed with the remaining items on the agenda. Speakers in support or opposition of an agenda item will have 3 minutes to speak unless they are solely representing a large group, such as a civic league or homeowners association, in which case they will have 10 minutes. Speakers who are participating virtually today, please mute any additional devices you have in the room to avoid any unnecessary background noise and/or the possibility of echoing and reverberation. Please note that once your name is called, you should wait 3 seconds before speaking to ensure the Planning Commission hears your complete remarks. Please begin your comments by identifying yourself. Also, do not ask, "Can you hear me?" as only one feed is open at a time to minimize the echo reverberation, and as such, you will be unable to hear a response. Please note that the actions taken by the Commission today are in the form of a recommendation to the Virginia Beach City Council. The final decision to approve or disapprove an application will be made by the City Council. The Commission thanks you for your attendance, and we hope that your experience here today leaves you feeling that you have been heard and treated fairly. Thank you.
Good, thank you, Bill. The first order of business is the consideration of request to withdraw or defer an item. Bill, if you'll start with that, please.
There are 5 items requesting a deferral. Agenda items 7, 14, 15, 16, and 17. The first item is Agenda Item 7, the application of Shelly, Gale, Baggenheart for a conditional use permit for short-term rental located at 2113 Atlantic Avenue, Unit 2B in the Beach District. I understand the request is for indefinite deferral. The applicant, Shelly Dagenhart, has signed up to speak virtually. Ms. Dagenhart, please state your name for the record before you ask for the deferral. (14, 15, 16, and 17 are combined into one request of Ocean Rental Properties, LLC, for a conditional use permit for short-term rentals, all located at 516 Norfolk Avenue, Units 1, 2, 4, and 5 in the Beach District. The applicant's representative, Eddie Bourdon, has signed up to speak, and I understand that the request will be to defer specifically to the September 9th public hearing. Mr. Bourdon, please state your name for the record. Thank you.
Madam Chair, members of the Commission, for the record, Eddie Bourdon, Virginia Beach Attorney, representing the applicant on these 4 short-term rental CUPs. There were discrepancies in the sign posting and what the sign said, and we deferred this to September. The signs have been correctly posted now.
Great,
Thank you.
thank you. Is there anyone here in opposition of the deferral? So do I have a motion to defer items 7 indefinitely, items 14, 15, 16, and 17 to the September 19th public meeting?
Madam Chair, I make a motion to defer item 7 indefinitely, items 14, 15, 16, and 17 for 30 days.
Great, do I have a second?
Second.
Thank you. Are there any planning commissions that are abstaining on these items to be deferred? Okay. All right, we'll call for the vote, please.
If you're in favor of this motion, say yes, and if you're opposed, say no. Mr. Alcaraz?
Yes.
Mr. Graham?
Yes.
Mr. Horsley?
Yes.
Mr. Inman?
Yes.
Ms. Klein?
Yes.
Mr. Redmond?
Yes.
Mr. Weiner?
Yes.
Ms. Oliver?
Yes.
By a recorded vote of 8-4 and 0 against, item 7 has been deferred indefinitely, and items 14, 15, 16, and 17 have been deferred to the September 9th public hearing.
Great, thank you, Marshall. The next order of business is the consent agenda, and Commissioner Weiner is going to handle this part.
Thank you, Madam Chair. The next order of business, the consent agenda. There are applications that are recommended for approval by staff, and the Planning Commission concurred, and there are no speakers in sign-up opposition. The Planning Commission places the following applications on the consent agenda: items 1, 2, 3, 4, 9, 10, 11, and 13. Well, let me back up a minute. Planning Commission also places the following applications for the conditional use permit for short-term rentals on the consent agenda as they meet the applicable requirements of Section 241.2, the zoning ordinance. Staff and Planning Commission support the application, and there are no known speakers and signed up to comment. which are items 9, 10, 11, and 13. Is there anyone here in opposition of these items? Before I make a motion, I'd like to ask if there are any speakers in opposition again on these items 1, 2, 3, 4, 9, 10, 11, and 13. Okay, I move the following items be approved in the consent agenda. 1, 2, 3, 4, 9, 10, 11, and 13.
Right. Do I have a second?
Second.
Okay. Are there any planning commissioners that need to abstain on any of these items? Okay. We'll go ahead and call for the vote, please, Marcia.
Sure. If you're in favor of the motion, say yes, and if you're opposed, say no. Mr. Alcaraz?
Yes.
Mr. Graham?
Yes.
Mr. Horsley?
Yes.
Mr. Inman?
Yes.
Ms. Klein?
Yes.
Mr. Redmond?
Yes.
Mr. Weiner?
Yes.
And Ms. Oliver.
Yes.
By recorded vote of 8 for and 0 against, the following items 1, 2, 3, 4, 9, 10, 11, and 13 have been approved by consent. If you had an application that was on the consent agenda, your request will now be scheduled for an upcoming city council meeting. Staff will contact you about the date. So that others may attend in the chamber, please exit via the side door. If you are watching virtually, you are free to exit or stay and watch. Thank you all for your participation. The next order of business is the regular agenda. Bill Landfair will introduce the first application.
Bill, can I just, Madam Chair, just before Bill begins with the regular agenda, I do want to note for the record that Mr. Wall, Mr. Costin, and Mr. Barnes are not present in the meeting due to personal things they need to attend to.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. Mr. Lanfair?
Madam Chair, we have 8 items on today's regular agenda. The first item on today's regular agenda is at agenda item number 5, the application of Franklin Johnston Group Management and Development, LLC. This is for a conditional use permit for housing for seniors and disabled persons. The applicant's representative is Rob Beeman. Mr. Beeman, you have up to 10 minutes. Please start by stating your name for the record. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair, Mr. Vice Chair, members of the commission. For the record, my name is Rob Beeman. I'm a local land use attorney with the Troutman Pepper Law Firm here today on behalf of the applicant, Franklin Johnston Group. We certainly appreciate Jonathan's presentation at the informal session this morning and appreciate originally being placed on the consent agenda. We do understand that after the informal meeting or during the informal meeting, there was a question raised regarding whether or not the project will have a affordable component. We do want to let y'all know that Franklin Johnston Group is strongly considering having an affordable component to this. They've certainly done a number of affordable deals, but at this point, they're unable, at this early stage in the project, to commit to any sort of percentage of affordable units. And with that, Taylor Franklin, James Noel from Franklin Johnston Group, and myself are here to answer any questions anybody has.
Great. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Anybody have any questions? No? Okay. Thank you.
Madam Chair, the next item on the agenda.
Well, hold on, Bill.
We got to vote on it.
Hold on, we got to vote on it.
My apologies.
All right, I'm going to close this session to the public and open it up for the commissioners. Yes, Mr. Redmond.
Madam Chairwoman, I move approval of the application.
Okay, do I have a
I
second?
second.
Great, thank you. Marshall, will you call for the vote, please?
Sure. If you're in favor of the motion, say yes, and if you're opposed, say no. Mr. Alcaraz?
Yes.
Mr. Graham?
Yes.
Mr. Horsley?
Yes.
Mr. Inman?
Yes.
Ms. Klein?
Yes.
Mr. Redmond?
Yes.
Mr. Weiner?
Yes.
And Ms. Oliver?
Yes.
By a recorded vote of 8 for and 0 against, agenda item 5 has been hereby recommended for approval by the Planning Commission.
Thank you.
Madam Chair, the next item on the agenda is item number 6, Bonnie G. Bright Sand Company for modification of conditions request at 200 Princess Anne Road in the Princess Anne District. The applicant's representative is Harold Jones. Mr. Jones, you have up to 10 minutes. Please start by stating your name for the record. Thank you.
Good morning, Madam Chair, members of the commission. My name is Harold Jones. I'm with Sigma Environmental, and I represent Bonnie Bright Sand Company. in this current application is essentially a renewal application for the conditional use permit that has been, that was issued in 2010, and previous conditional use permits that were issued prior to that. The mine right now has, we're still working within the mine, and we need additional time to complete the removal of marketable material, and more importantly, to have available amount of time for mine reclamation, which is a requirement of the previously issued conditional use permits. It's also a requirement of the State Department of Mines, Mineral and Energy and the federal mining regulations. The pit does provide a great amount of public service to the community. Certainly various departments within the city of Virginia Beach utilizes its products, public works, public utilities, et cetera. And it also is owned and operated locally by the owner, who employs 40 to 45 local people, and employs those folks that really need the work. As part of the original permit that was issued, we had 4 monitoring wells that were installed. During subsequent applications for additional extensions of conditional use permit, over time, we now have 12 monitoring wells on this site that are being monitored, 3 of which are USGS wells. They are at varying depths, and it provides us a good cross-section of the hydrology in accordance to the geographic stratigraphy on this site, and it gives us a good idea whether or not there's any potential saltwater intrusion, which has always been a concern of a number of reviews of this previous conditional use permit application. And to date, we have not found, and we submit data on a quarterly basis to the city, and that information is reviewed internally, and they also have an independent environmental consultant that reviews that data and provides reports back to them. And thus far, there is no indication that there's any saltwater intrusion on this site. There are 3 different aquifers that potentially would be, that are monitored as a result of the well installation, and there's only really 1 or 2, the Surficial or the Yorktown, or the Yorktown aquifer that would potentially be utilized by local residents within the area, and there's obviously no cone of depression associated with this that would affect those wells. One of the other major conditions was that we establish a groundwater monitoring program and a recharge plan, and that was put together and approved by planning staff back in 2010, and we continue to operate under that and all the conditions that were issued in 2010. There have been no notices of any violations. We report on time consistently every quarter, and there are no violations whatsoever that have occurred in the mine related to the city requirements. Other than that, I will open it up for any questions that the commission may have.
Anybody have any questions? Thank you very much. We'll come back to you.
Okay, thank you.
I understand we have 1 speaker.
Yes, Madam
correct?
Chair, there is 1 speaker signed up to speak, Tyler Rose.
Okay.
Mr. Rose, please state your name for the record. Thank you.
Good afternoon, Madam Chair, and members of the Planning Commission. My name is Tyler Rose. I'm a local attorney with the law firm Williams Mullen. I reached out to several of you representing some concerns that a client of mine had with regard to this project. He's lived in the area for a long time. I do have him here with me today, Mr. Mark Risolfi. He'll be able to speak a little bit more to his experience with the project and the impacts on the local environment down there, and then also just with the community in general. We have been in some discussions with Mr. Landfair, and he's been very helpful in providing some additional clarity on the project. You might be able to tell with the email, we originally thought there was an expansion of the operation. He represented to us that it was just an additional operational timeline. They're seeking an extension of another 10 years. We would request that 10 years be reduced down to 5 years, and there'd be more periodic monitoring, especially with regard to the additional concern with sea level rise, and request some additional tests and monitoring that originally were in place back in 2000. At least our understanding is that there were some tests done in terms of the geological impact. So just as a concerned citizen, my client would request some additional information on just how that impacts the environment and the community as a whole. And I'll allow my client, Mr. Risolfi, to speak to his experiences down there and some of the things that he's witnessed with the operation. But thank you for your time today.
Great, thank you. Do we have any questions? Okay. Great, thank you.
Good afternoon, thank you. My name is Mark Risolfi, and I live on Pocahontas Club Road, which adjoins this project here. As a matter of fact, I live in the Pocahontas Club, which is listed in the Virginia Beach publication of 50 most historic properties of Virginia Beach. And it is a historic hunt club that my wife and I bought in the early 90s and did a lot of work and spent a lot of money restoring it. It's good for another 100 years, I'm happy to say. And we also expanded our property to include about 38 acres on Back Bay. When this project came up for the 2010 timeframe, we looked into it and we heard the concerns of everybody. We listened to the city's own experts about the danger to the aquifer, which monitoring helps, but it's a time thing as well. The minute salt water intrudes in our aquifer, we have no drinking water. That's all there is to it. We had a scare about a year ago at my son's property, which is also on Pocahontas Club Road, and we had to have someone come in and find out why his water was salty, and it turned out to be a moving thing. It moved out, and he then didn't have the problem. But it gave us a scare, and it made us think about it. You know, I am pro-business. At the time in 2010, I looked at everything. They said they're going to monitor it, they're going to take care of it. The environmental concerns were huge. If you look, we're on a narrow peninsula. We got the Intracoastal on one side, Back Bay on the other. And the size of this project originally was already quite substantial to that piece of land. And then when it moved across the border to North Carolina and expanded in size, it was disturbing environmentally to see this going on. We have now a lot of topsoil gone, a lot of compacted land, you know, without the trees and everything that could suck up water or crops or whatever. And I was weighing all that, but I said, you know, if he's going to be 10 years, he's going to do something. It, at the time, helped the city a lot because they used it for the beach replenishment. And as their speaker said, helps the community. I was a customer, bought sand from him, everything like that. But I thought it was, you know, his word, 10 years. And when I saw this, I was surprised. I was surprised for two reasons. One, if he had 10 years before, he skipped across the border, what, halfway through or whatever. But what if he used that 10 years in Virginia Beach like he said he was going to? We'd be done. How much did he take already? How much of the amount he's allowed did he take already? And if he X% he took, how long did he do to take that? Why does he need 10 years to scrape up whatever's left or what have you? Or why can't this stuff be moved over to the operation in North Carolina, which is further away from Pocahontas Club Road? You know, we used to wake up before this operation, listening to the sound of birds. You know, we have a beautiful property, all beautiful wildlife and everything. Now we hear the backup beeps of dump trucks and the clanging of the back of them to get the wet sand out. It's loud. It's like a bomb, and it goes on all day. We have a industrial mining operation at the end of our street. And my question would be,
I'm so
if this could
sorry.
be mitigated. Oh, okay, I'm sorry.
But the red light's.
Oh, okay, I see that.
So,
All right, thank you for your
Do we have
time.
any questions
Oh.
for him, please? No? Thank you.
Thank you for your time.
Yes, sir. Would you like to come back up and address some of the statements that were made, please?
At least around, at least with the comments associated with with the wells and the stratigraphy there. One thing that has to be taken into consideration is the depth of the permitted mine, which is only 25 feet deep from the surface. There are 3 different aquifers. The surface aquifer, if anybody puts a well in a surface aquifer that's less than 25 feet, because 25 feet is also where we hit the first aquitard, and that's a restricted layer in the soil profile, and it prevents water or it severely restricts it from vertical movement. And what happens is that by limiting it to 25 feet, you're down to the bottom of your reserve of your marketable sand, and you have a restricted layer. So anything that's going on in that area, 25 feet or above, is generally out of the zone of where normal people are going to be putting wells in. The primary reason is because it's full of iron. And everybody knows what iron does to your bathtub and your sinks and your clothes and everything else. Most wells that are put in are drilled wells. They're going down to the second or third aquifer down below the confining lens. So if they have well failures of some sort, then they're beyond the direct impact of dewatering the pit. And because of the aquitard, there's very little in terms of development of a cone of depression below that. So, if they have problems with their wells, the chances are those problems are for some other reason. We have the 12 wells that I talked about completely circumvent both the North Carolina and Virginia mines. They've been looked at and approved by the hydrogeologists in Richmond with the USGS, and they're also evaluated on a quarterly basis, excuse me, by an independent consultant, Environmental Consultants out in Newport News, and they report back to the City Public Works Department in terms of various constituents that are in the water quality that are used as markers for saltwater intrusion. What's going on in terms of the level of Back Bay? In terms of global rise, that's going to happen, and it's happening. It's only going to increase, and it's not going to have any bearing on water quality itself within the confining clayland or confining aquifers below that. And I see my time's up.
Do we have any questions? Yes, Don.
Harold, these monitoring wells you've got and all, you think they are adequate to continue the use of them to address any concerns that may arise?
I do. Matter of fact, we have one on Pocahontas Road that has a satellite uplink to it, and I can get on the computer and tell you exactly what's going on in terms of water level, and a couple of other various constituents that are monitored in those wells. Some are monitored as deep as 180 feet. And we've got a good cross-section of well depths that looks at the various horizontal movement of water, both horizontal and vertical movement of water within the various aquifers. So it's a well-thought-out plan in terms of monitoring and evaluating the effects of potential dewatering on the above the superficial aquitard, which is the top 22 to 23 feet.
So basically what Mr. Bright wants to do is continue to operate as he's done the last 10 years for the next 10 years, and he hadn't had any problems and the same monitoring system is being effective.
And the extent of the mine has been excavated thus far. There are materials. We also mix a lot of his clients require certain specifications for construction. And there's a lot of storage, and then there's also mixing of that material to meet those specifications. So you've got on-site storage to be able to meet what your potential customer needs for road construction, building construction, whatever the case may be. So there's that, and then there's, you just don't go in for mine reclamation and do that in 1 week or 2 weeks. It takes time. You've got to go in and do it right, use the right materials, plantings, those sorts of things. So it takes time.
Thank you, sir.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, Whitney.
The website that's set up that you're able to go on and look at to monitor the wells, Is that something that the gentleman here is able to actually access?
I wouldn't think so.
I don't know if it's open, I don't know if it's a public access or not. I can certainly find out.
I mean, it seems like that would be, you know, it's his drinking water. It'd be nice to
Yeah.
be able to access that.
Well, sir, I'm sorry, that's okay.
Sorry, I kind of made eye contact.
I know.
So that was probably partly my fault.
I would assume it is because I used the Beggar's Bridge tide gauge uplink from USGS for a lot of different reasons on Back Bay. And that gives me real-time data, both for water level, temperature, precipitation, salinity, and some other components. So it should be there.
Wait, do we have any other questions? No? Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
I do have one question for the applicant, and maybe we'll let the attorney, since he's representing you, maybe I'll ask you if you don't mind coming up. And I just want to make sure I was understanding, because I know that there was a question of the water quality. Has he had a problem with the water quality in proximity to this borough pit?
As Mr. Grisolfi mentioned, there was that one particular scare with his son's property. He has a property there, his children have a property down there, so it's a big family grouping down there. So they're disproportionately impacted by this whole operation. So his entire just family to this point has been impacted by this operation, and his property in general. He has specific anecdotal things he can speak to. They may be complying with all of the state and federal requirements at this point. It's just that, you know, there are serious concerns that he has about his family. These concerns, if that groundwater is penetrated by salt water, it's irreversible, and they're kind of left without recourse at that point. So they're very sensitive to that, and then also they're not entirely clear on the impact that sea level rise may have on this project. They may not have any, but they're not entirely sure. So they're just not really in a position to evaluate the overall impact. So they're just here expressing their concerns and hoping that the city will take at least the responsibility to look out for them seriously and impose conditions that will look out for the community down there as well. So I'm happy to turn it over to Mr. Grisolfi if he wants to speak. If you have any specific questions to his experience down there, I'm here
No.
representing him generally.
No, I think I'm good. I just sort of wanted just to kind of see where we were
Great.
on that.
Thank you,
Okay.
Madam Chair.
Okay, great, thank you. I guess we'll go ahead and we're going to close this and for the commission to have a discussion on this.
Madam Chairman, I would submit that this operation's been going on for many years, and the last 10 years in particular have been monitored by, as Mr. Jones said, some 12 monitoring wells, and I don't think there's been any complaints voiced to Mr. Bright about any problems. If they have, I'm sure, knowing the Mr. Bright in his community service, he would not want to do anything that would harm anybody in the community, and I'm sure he would address those problems right away. So with that being said, and with the use of this material that he's got in the city and the surrounding area is really a big thing for this area to have access to that sand pit. So with that, whenever you're ready for a motion, I'm ready to make one.
Anybody else? Dave?
I move approval of the application.
I'll second it.
Michelle, will you call for the question, please?
Okay. No abstentions? No abstentions?
Oh, I'm sorry, I didn't know. Do we have any abstentions to this vote? Any of the commissioners? No. Thank
Okay.
you.
No problem. If you're in favor of a motion, say yes, and if you're opposed, say no. Mr. Alcaraz?
Yes.
Mr. Graham?
Yes.
Mr. Horsley?
Yes.
Mr. Inman?
Yes.
Ms. Klein?
Yes.
Mr. Redmond?
Yes.
Mr. Weiner?
Yes.
Ms. Oliver?
Yes.
By a recorded vote of 8-4 and 0 against, agenda item 6 is hereby recommended for approval by the Planning Commission. Thank you.
Thank you.
The next item on today's regular agenda is Agenda Item 8, Charlie Kim for conditional use permit request for a short-term rental at 809 Vanderbilt Avenue in the Beach District. The applicant is Charlie Kim. Mr. Kim is a virtual speaker. Mr. Kim, you have up to 10 minutes. Please pause for 3 seconds so we can unmute your mic. Please start by stating your name for the record. Thank you.
Hello, my name is Charlie Kim. Thank you, Madam Chair, member of the City Council, for reviewing our application. Thank you, planning member, Mr. William Miller, and other staff member who have provided us with guidance and direction to get us to this point. With COVID-19 and social distancing, we have grandparents that live with us in their 80s, so we decided to do this virtually. My wife and I purchased the 809 Vanderbilt Beach home in late April, ultimately with the intention of family enjoyment with our 4 kids and my in-laws until I am fully retired in a few years. Our plan for the short-term rental is not to build a lucrative business, but simply to supplement until I fully retire. In our decision to apply for short-term rental, we remain very sensitive to maintaining good relationship with our fellow neighbors, especially since we will be moving into this home permanently. But even with one opposing letter, I would say we are still in great relationship with Mr. Daddio. As a homeowner, investor, and landlord, experience-wise, I've been and still am an active member of HOA and active participant in HOAs where I have investment properties in condos and so on. And for over 20 years, my wife and I have actively managed our properties and respect both owners and renters. We actively perform the vetting of our renters, and we treat our property as if we would be living there ourselves. And in fact, after moving into this Virginia Beach home, we've been complimented several times by our neighbors and how well we have tremendously improved the look of the home. In preparation for this rental, we've not only complied with the city rules, but have planned. Rental agreement will include things like only allow family groups, minimum age of 30, no fireworks and such. And we will also have welcome packets that will explicitly state, indicating that we will have security cameras located in certain positions, which the renters will know, maintain noise control, and most importantly, respect fellow neighbors. We are currently pursuing rental management company, but we will continue to screen the renters ourselves and have local service providers such as plumbers, and we request this approval as we've been compliant with this application. We follow the procedures and guidelines, no balance in our taxes and whatnot. We have erected the orange sign, although the sign got bent in half after the last hurricane, but it was displayed for about a month. We have held off on renting before approval by the Virginia Beach government to maintain our respect for rules and process. We understand the concerns of the renters, and we consider about the wear and tear as any homeowners would be. We just would ask our Madam Chair and the commissioners to please consider our application for approval. And if there's any chance of being denied, please, I ask that you be clear as to why we would be rejected. Thank you.
Thank you. Do we have a speaker?
Madam Chair, there is one speaker signed up to speak, William Daddio. Mr. Daddio, please state your name for the record. Thank you. Daddio does not appear to be here, Madam Chair.
Okay. All right.
There are no more known speakers.
Okay. Well, on that note, we will go ahead and close this and open up to any comments or a motion from any of the planning commissioners.
Well,
I had asked to hear this because I did receive calls. I was hoping someone was here to speak up if they were against it, but I need to hear it, you guys need to hear it, and it's a shame. So, I mean, if they're meeting the criteria and I don't get any complaints and we do it publicly, then I'm going to get some comments from you guys or I'm going to make a motion.
Make a motion.
Nobody else?
No?
Well, then I make a motion that we approve the application.
Okay. All right.
Was there a second?
Yes.
Second.
Okay, thank you. If you're in favor of the motion, say yes. If you're opposed, say no. Mr. Alcaraz?
Yes.
Mr. Graham?
Yes.
Mr. Horsley?
Yes.
Mr. Inman?
Yes.
Ms. Klein?
Yes.
Mr. Redmond?
Yes.
Mr. Weiner?
Yes.
And Ms. Oliver?
Yes.
By recorded vote of 8-4 and 0 against, agenda item 8 is hereby recommended for approval by the Planning Commission.
Great. Thank you.
The next item on today's regular agenda is Agenda Item 12, Charity Figalo for a conditional use permit request for a short-term rental at 448 Garrison Place in the Beach District. The applicant is Charity Figalo. Ms. Figalo is a virtual speaker. Ms. Figalo, you have up to 10 minutes. Please pause for 3 seconds so we can unmute your mic. Please start by stating your name for the record. Thank you.
Good afternoon, Madam Chair and Commissioners. My name is Charity Figallo. Thank you so much for taking my application into consideration today. I am a lifelong Virginia Beach resident. My father retired U.S. military here in Virginia Beach, stationed at Oceana, as did my husband. My children are also Virginia Beach residents, graduating here and currently in school. I'm very involved with my church, and I really do love my community and my city. I'm seeking a conditional use permit for my childhood home. After much consideration and prayer, due to some serious life changes, including the death of my younger sister and mother who resided here, I spoke to a few friends who were doing this and decided, because of my family's emotional attachment to the home and the ability to still enter the home and have family gatherings here, as well as the income it would provide to afford some much needed updates and maintenance, this seemed to be the perfect solution versus traditional renting to tenants that could possibly make my family and my neighbors, some of them who I've known my whole life, they could be potentially stuck for a tenant for at least a year that perhaps would not follow some rules, perhaps who would bring additional troubles to our street, which I do not want. We do have a property on my right that is a rental, and there have been some unsavory situations there over the years. I really do care about my neighbors and my neighborhood. Our yard and our home are always kept up and neat, and this makes others take pride in ownership as well. I just really appreciate your consideration today. I've invested a lot into this property, and I just am not looking to make a ton of money, but to just be able to keep the home available to my family and to be able to make some continued improvements on the home as well. So thank you so much.
Madam Chair, there are no more known speakers.
Great, thank you. Then I'm going to open up the floor for discussion for the planning commissioners, I believe. Yes, Robin.
It sounds as if the ramp was put in place while her mother and sister resided there. I guess this question might be more for Kevin. If they removed the ramp, if that was an option, would that free up additional space for parking?
Yes, it appears that if they remove that ramp, they would have more of an opportunity to bring the car up to the front. However, they would have to make sure that they meet the applicable width.
Yes, they would have more room up front, but it appears that width may be substandard to the 18 feet that would be required for 2 legal parking spaces per our zoning ordinance.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Kevin. Anybody have any other comments on this? I think that was the issue that we had or I personally had, was the expansion of the driveway, being that fact that we've kind of stuck to that, or in the past, we have voted to stick to the width of the driveway, so I feel strongly about that, even under these circumstances.
Good.
I felt the same way, Mrs. Oliver, about that. Mr. Inman did bring up a good point. We've approved houses that haven't been built yet for short-term rentals, and I'm not really in favor of gravel, but it's better than concrete. I'm kind of torn on both sides, but I understand Mr. Inman's coming from, and I understand where you're coming from.
Yeah, Dave?
I would note, the staff report says on-street parking is permitted 24 hours per day. Therefore, any overflow parking beyond the minimum parking spaces required could occur within the public street. And I don't really think this is a problem. So we're talking about, inches perhaps of gravel and, ample space in the street in any event. And they are public streets. So no, I just don't see where I don't know, is there really an issue there?
How much, do we now have, I don't know this area very well. How available is, because we're so down on the ocean front where there is no on-street parking because of the restricted parking. So is there a lot of on-street parking here in this area? Does anybody know? Staff? This is Plaza, is that right?
Yes, on-street parking typically is not an issue like you would
Here?
see at the ocean front. You can typically find on-street parking in very close proximity to a home in this neighborhood.
Well, then that takes
Seems to
care
me
of
we're
that. Then that
splitting
takes care of that
hairs.
problem.
Yeah, seems to me we're splitting hairs here.
Okay, yeah.
In the Google Maps view of the house, there appears to be ample room for at least one additional car.
Okay,
But the other side,
okay.
to the left. At least one more car would fit.
Then I don't think,
Well,
yes?
I knew parking's a little problem of mine. Now we're saying that off-site is okay? That's, whoever thought that these short-term rentals would end up west of the resort, but off-site parking is okay when the ordinance says required parking on-site. It says here it's going to be proposed. It's not done. It's going to be proposed within 60, or it's going to be done within 60 days of city council action. So I have a problem with that. I'm just going with the ordinance. It says on-site parking
On-site.
for
I'm-
short-term rentals is required. They don't have it. It doesn't exist now. And now we're talking about using off-site parking that's directly in front of the property.
But don't we allow short-term rent, or the owners of short-term properties to rent or lease spaces in the parking garage that are technically off-site?
But we do that, and then they have that in order to make up for the spot that they don't have. So that's part of their on-site parking. So they have to go to a parking garage, because they can't park within the neighborhoods of the oceanfront because they have to have a parking permit.
Right.
And so when they can't meet that requirement, then they have to lease a space in a parking garage with reasonable proximity to the house.
So how is this different than that?
Because she's not leasing it, I guess. Yes, Mr. Edmund.
You're on the spot over there, Madam
Is there
Chairwoman.
is there something in the conditions that says it's not effective, that the permit is not effective until the expansion is made?
Yes, Mr. Inman, the condition states that in order for them to be approved, it has to be installed within a certain time frame after city council approval, so.
Yes, Mr.
My
Redmond.
question is, why would they augment the parking if they don't get their conditional use permit? mean, that's why you would do it within X amount of time after city council approval. And if they don't do it, they don't get their conditional use permit, they don't rent it on a short-term basis.
Right.
And again, I think we're kind of, it
Yeah.
seems to me there's much ado about nothing here. Staff's comfortable with it. I agree with David. I'd much rather have gravel than more impervious, particularly because it's not a lot anyway. And in any event, it's a street where your parking is easily had. So I don't see what the issue is. Which is not to say that I minimize your concerns, George. I respect them, obviously, but I just don't see it, or agree with that.
All right. Anybody else? Do we have a motion?
Beach.
Yes, Mr.
I'll make a motion, we approve the application.
Second.
Do we have anybody that needs to abstain? Any of the commissioners need to abstain from this? Okay. Michelle, will you please call for the question?
Sure. If you're in favor of the motion, say yes, and if you're opposed, say no. Mr. Akaraz?
No.
Mr. Graham?
Yes.
Mr. Horsley?
Yes.
Mr. Inman?
Yes.
Ms. Klein?
Yes.
Mr. Redmond?
Yes.
Mr. Weiner?
Yes.
Ms. Oliver?
No.
By recorder vote of 6-4 and 2 against, agenda item 12 is hereby recommended for approval by the Planning Commission.
Planning Commissioners, the next 4 items on the regular agenda today are item 18, City of Virginia Beach, an ordinance to amend section 104 to allow civil penalties for the violation of section 241.2 pertaining to short-term rentals. Item 19, City of Virginia Beach, an ordinance to amend section 241.2 pertaining to the revocation of grandfather status and the city council findings for short-term rental uses. Item 20, City of Virginia Beach, an ordinance to amend section 1903, allowing certain short-term rentals as permitted uses in the Old Beach Overlay District. And item 21, City of Virginia Beach, an ordinance to establish transitional rules for the review of conditional use permits for property in the Old Beach Overlay District. Kevin Kemp will present these items. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Lamfair. Good afternoon, Commissioners. As Bill mentioned, these 4 items are the referral, the proposed amendment ordinance from Councilman Tower. You should be familiar with these items as you reviewed them twice in July, once following your July 8th Planning Commission hearing, and then you had a meeting for public comment on July 20th. In which there were approximately 30 speakers at that meeting. I will just briefly go through these proposed amendments, agenda items, and explain each one. Agenda item 18 deals with the way we enforce short-term rental violations. This would change the enforcement from what is now a criminal violation to a civil penalty. It would allow our inspectors to issue fines, a $200 penalty for the first violation and then $500 for each additional. It will help staff be able to enforce the ordinance and make it a easier and faster way to get through the process, whereas now they would need to, were required to go through the criminal court proceedings to get to this fine structure. Agenda item 19 deals with 2 items. One is the grandfather status of short-term rentals, and the other are required findings for short-term rental uses. The grandfathering, this ordinance proposes that the grandfathering status, if a short-term rental were not used as such for a 2-year period, would be revoked by the planning director. This aligns with our current ordinance regulations for non-conforming uses. As the ordinance is written now, short-term rental use, if it was grandfathered, it runs with the land and it runs in perpetuity. The second item in this amendment are the required findings, and these provide a basis for which staff, planning commission, and city council could evaluate and ultimately approve or deny these applications. I'll briefly go over the 4 of those. The first is that the density or number of short-term rentals in the immediate vicinity do not change the character of the neighborhood. The second is that parking is readily available. On-site parking is visually appealing and environmentally friendly. This is in a reaction to what we're seeing where a lot of short-term rentals are paving their entire yards to meet our parking requirements. The third is that if there is an increased occupancy due to the short-term rental use, that occupancy remains compatible with the residential nature of the neighborhood as to not create negative impacts such as noise and trash. And lastly, it recognizes that short-term rentals are a needed resource, particularly in areas of the city that are in close proximity to venues or districts that bring high number of visitors. Agenda item 20. This deals specifically with the Old Beach District, the Old Beach overlay. And what it does is it allows short-term rentals as a matter of right in the Old Beach overlay, provided that the properties meet two specific standards. One is that all requirements of Section 241.2 are met, and the second is that the short-term rental property is the principal residence and owned by the operator. What this would do is allows for only one short-term rental per property owner. If these requirements as listed are not met, the way this ordinance is written, the property owner would not have the opportunity to even apply for a CUP in front of council. They would either meet the requirements and be able to operate as a short-term rental, or they would be prohibited. Lastly, item 21 is a transition ordinance, and this ordinance simply states that any property that submitted an application to the planning department following the date these referral ordinances were referred to you, which is June 9th, would be subject to these new rules immediately upon the approval of these ordinances. You know, for instance, an application that were submitted today, even though there are different rules than this in place, they would be subject to the rules once this is approved by council. I will be available for any questions should they come up. Thank you, Commissioners.
Thank you, Mr. Kemp.
Madam Chair, there are 19 speakers signed up to speak. The first speaker is David Grothmall, followed by Joseph Montano. Mr. Grothmall, please state your name for the record. Thank you.
Madam Chairwoman, members of the Commission, I'm David Grothmall. I live at 219A 68th Street, which is not in the Old Beach area. But I believe that what you do today, or whenever you do it, is going to eventually make its way throughout the areas that have short-term rentals. My concern is with the second area. The council's resolution that's sent over the package of ordinances says they were concerned about the short-term rentals increasing too fast in the Old Beach neighborhood and other areas. And they felt like they needed to get a handle on it. I believe the goal is to preserve these areas as residential neighborhoods. And residential neighborhoods should take precedent over short-term rentals. That means there should be a majority of residences over short-term rentals. So what is a majority? Is it 50%? You have 51% residents and 49 short-term rentals? No, I don't think so. It has to be a clear majority. So I suggest to you that you need to come up with a number of residences and short-term rentals that clearly preserves the neighborhood. as a residence, as a primary residence. I'm suggesting 2/3, 1/3, or 65%, 35%, using each street as the place to measure. If 22nd Street has 35% short-term rentals already, then you don't approve any more short-term rentals. That will make it easy and clear for everybody to understand what is the maximum of short-term rentals that will be allowed. I think that's the key to putting a halt on these applications. The guidelines that you have in place now don't do anything to halt the growth of short-term rentals. Thank you very much.
Do we have any questions, the gentleman? Thank you so very much.
Madam Chair, the next speaker on this item is Joseph Montano. Mr. Montano is a virtual speaker. Mr. Montano, please pause for 3 seconds so we can unmute your mic. Please start by stating your name for the record. Thank you.
Good afternoon, Chairwoman Oliver and members of the Virginia Beach Planning Commission. My name is Joseph Montano, and I serve as the Virginia Beach Government Affairs Manager for Expedia Group and its family of travel brands. I'd like to thank you all for the opportunity on Virginia Beach's to comment on Virginia Beach's efforts to amend its existing short-term rental law. By way of background, Expedia Group is the world's travel platform with leading websites such as Expedia.com, Orbitz, Travelocity.com, and many others. We service the entire travel ecosystem from hotels and airlines to rental cars and vacation rentals. Our vacation rental company, Vrbo, is the world leader in traditional or whole home vacation rentals. For 25 years, Vrbo and our local homeowners have been focused on serving traveling families. In fact, our average customer booking travel on our platform is a 50-year-old woman traveling with a family of 4. That long-standing focus on responsible travel translates to our collaborative approach to fair and effective policies. Over the course of the last 2 months, we've hosted virtual town halls with our partners here in town, and it's been incredible to hear their stories. Our property owner and manager partners have been members of the Virginia Beach community for decades. They find immense pride in welcoming traveling families to their small slice of heaven and are eager to comply with regulations set forth by this governing body. However, both Expedia Group and our community of homeowners, managers, and small business leaders are concerned with the current proposal, specifically with regards to the proposed amendment banning owners from offering secondary homes or non-primary residences in certain areas of the city. We believe there could be a better path forward that addresses the concerns of the community while at the same time protecting Virginia Beach's long history of welcoming families to whole home rentals. Expedia Group has learned from hundreds of local efforts over the last 10 years that policies work best when governments and platforms work together. A holistic solution could help Virginia Beach in 3 key areas: tax collection, compliance, and reasonable limits. And they could include the following platform tools. Vrbo would create a mandatory field for owners to enter their short-term rental permit number in the same format as issued by the city. Vrbo would also display the permit numbers on all new listings and existing property listings. Vrbo would remove any existing listing that does not display a permit number and will prohibit any listings that do not display a permit number. An alternative to the current primary-only restriction that has worked in other markets is a cap of 180 days per property. The citywide 180-day cap would allow Virginia Beach residents with a second home to participate in the short-term rental market. It would also dissuade individuals looking solely for investment properties to put on their short-term rental market. This policy of 180-day cap is one that Vrbo would support. As the leader in traditional vacation rentals, we stand ready to be a partner to you and your staff to ensure that the tradition of whole home vacation rentals continues to be a part of Virginia Beach's vibrant accommodations marketplace. Thank you again for your time and consideration.
Madam Chair, the next speaker on this item is Gretchen Heel, followed by Betsy Atkinson. Ms. Heel, please state your name for the record. Thank you.
Good
Good afternoon. I am Gretchen Heel. I work for the Hampton Roads Realtors Association. And based on some of your comments in this morning's session, it answered a few of our questions, but I do have a few statements that they've asked me to share with you on these 4 items. The Hampton Roads Realtors Association recognizes the need to have property owners comply with guidelines for operating short-term rentals, and our members try to ensure positive experiences for the neighbors of all the STRs that they manage, as well as the tourists visiting the city. However, we do have a few concerns with the zoning violations that different than others, and again, you addressed some of those concerns this morning, so depending on what you end up with your final decision, that may go away. On this second one, the grandfather clause, on this change, we would ask you consider including some more specific language on the parameters for inactivity on a property that is scheduled to have its grandfather status removed. When does the clock of the 2 years start? Just a little more definition around it so that people would know what those parameters are, excuse me. And for all of the items, and this, if I'm misunderstanding it, I apologize, but in 241.2, it applies to Sandbridge, and we would like that any changes you make do not apply to Sandbridge as far as short-term rentals are concerned. That's all.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Madam Chair, the next speaker on this item is Betsy Atkinson, followed by Paige Mayaris. Ms. Atkinson, please state your name for the record. Thank
Hi,
you.
I'm Betsy Atkinson. I'm glad to be here to speak to you today. We're teaming up a little bit here, but I would like to specifically talk about grandfathering. I was on some of the original committees that created some of these ordinances, and one of the things that we all agreed on was that if you grandfathered the property, it ran with the land. And now you're trying to take away the grandfathering by reducing it to only, if you don't use it for 2 years, then you wouldn't have the right to keep the grandfathering. I would highly suggest to you to please not approve this. We have a lot of situations, especially in the North End, where, might be a mom and a dad, and then they might pass away, and the kids might move into the house, and then they might, stay there a couple of years and then want to go back to having short-term rentals like they had before. And it's also good for marketing. If somebody has a home that's been grandfathered with short-term rentals, and they would have the ability to continue short-term rentals without having to come back for a CPU. So I thank you very much for listening to me, and I hope you don't pass this.
Thank you.
Madam Chair, the next speaker on this item is Paige Mayaris, followed by John Moffett. Ms. Mayaris, please state your name for the record. Thank you.
Paige Miares. Thank you, Madam Speaker, or Madam Chairwoman, Madam Chairman. What is your?
It's all good.
Okay, all right. My name's Paige Miares, and I am the principal broker of Atkinson Realty. I just want to say that the crux of this issue really at it is a tourism issue. And behind it is whether our city really supports tourism and people coming here to spend their hard-earned money in our city. I think the consumer has spoken pretty loudly that they want to stay in our cottages. And especially in a post-COVID-19 world, habits of how we work, vacation, are changing even more rapidly. Many of our businesses have expressed that they're on life support with the COVID shutdown. And the question I would ask is why are we looking at policies that prohibit visitors to our city? Why are we pushing them to Myrtle Beach and OBX? Those are our competitors. As far as these regulations, there are a couple of encouraging signs to me. One is the fact that there's something that actually says it's a needed resource in our city. I think that's true, and again, I think the consumer has echoed that. And then just the change to the parking, because the discussion around parking it goes on and on. It's almost arbitrary. It seems a little capricious to me from an outside perspective. And so something that says, visually appealing, environmentally responsible, that's helpful to kind of cut through some of this, measuring this. It has to have this many spaces. The reality of these families coming to visit is that they don't bring, if it's a 4-bedroom house, they're not bringing 4 cars. I mean, that's not how that's not how it works practically. And the other thing I do just want to address is that it's very disturbing to see the new, there's even been discussion here about, do we follow the rules? Do we go outside the rules? Do we add provisions? Do we not add provisions? And that seems to be a little bit of an internal discussion. But to see some of these applicants who's had their applications in since January and have these arbitrary amendments to limit the occupancy and to limit the amount of reservations per week is troubling from an onlooking citizen. And it really changes the dynamics. For my family, it would increase the cost of a vacation to Virginia Beach, and not by a little when you play with those numbers. So I think that has to be a consideration as we go forward. And I think there are ways to partner in a private-public type setting to help increase the accountability for these things and take the backlog off of the city. The beach borough, making it by right, which is something in one of the ordinances, I support that for our communities that hug the shoreline for sure, because that is where we have traditionally had them. That's where the character of our neighborhoods include them. And so, there should be some by right pieces to the zoning that come forward. So just to end, I'm probably out of time, but I just want to reiterate that at the crux of this is, are we a city that want families to come and stay here? Do we want them to come and spend their money here? We in the industry love these neighborhoods. We want to protect them. We want them to be great places to live. We have been and shown to be good partners with these neighborhoods for over 80 years with the business that I do. So I don't know if there's any questions. But.
Do we have any questions? No. Thank you, Paige.
Madam Chair, the next speaker on this item is John Moffett, followed by Lynn Hume. Mr. Moffett, please state your name for the record. Thank you.
Just sit down. That's Jim. Bill, I think it's supposed to be Jim.
Jim Moffett?
Yeah.
I'm not speaking to.
Oh, okay, okay.
I'm sorry. Okay. So the next speaker is Lynn Hume.
Hello, my name is Lynn Hume, and it's hard to believe we're back up here again discussing short-term rentals. I've been a property owner in the Shore Drive area since the 1980s, and I've got long-term rentals and short-term rentals that are grandfathered, that are always been considered second homes and vacation homes, and they're built in the 50s and 70s. Due to COVID-19, I'm sure that many property owners have had to change some of their short-term rentals into long-term. Personally, we put some doctors in one of our rentals who are working in local hospitals. They left for a while, and now they want to come back and do a long-term rental. I want to emphasize that as grandfathered properties, our zoning and property rights were already set last year. Our current rights exist. Item 19, the 24-month rule, allows the possibility to lose our grandfathered status. Health, economy, and various personal circumstances could change the use of our property for a period of time. Current rights should remain, not subject to being dismissed if not used in a 24-month period. This is not a conditional use permit. Grandfathered should run with the land. Item 18 allows for harassment from neighbors and subjects owners to either pay a fine, considered guilty, or made to defend themselves. It appears that hateful rhetoric from anti-short-term rental people has generated this amendment to appease those who have always disliked short-term rentals. We attended one of those all Civic League meetings this winter, and the attitude for snitching and telling on people was rampant. Actually, it was like being in a foreign country. A trash can left out too long could generate a report and a fine. I'm not aware of any loud or disruptive short-term rentals in the Bay Area. Cape Story, Ocean Park, Shore Drive Many people speaking negatively do not even have short-term rentals near them. In comparison, homeowners and long-term rentals create parking, noise, and trash problems, and there are laws to deal with them. It's normal for residents in the beach area to park cars, have parties, and big gatherings. It's the beach. We have already spent 2 or 3 years hashing out the zoning rules. In this troubled time with COVID-19, people are not aware of this issue. It's come up again. It's our retirement income, as well as many others, and we planned according to these rules. We take pride in our properties. You would be downzoning our current property rights. Please do not further subject grandfathered properties to the threat of losing our rights or subject us to targeted harassment and fines. Please leave the grandfathered rules the way they are, now without changes. Thanks for your consideration.
Madam Chair, the next speaker on this item is Elaine Fakit, followed by Joan Davis. Ms. Fakit, please state your name for the record. Thank you.
Hi, good afternoon. My name is Elaine Fakity, and I moved to Sandbridge 25 years ago. I chose to live there even knowing that all the houses around me were rentals and had been so for 50 years. So the false narrative that this is a new thing that we have to deal with is quite to the contrary. It's also a false narrative that all short-term rentals are party houses. 11 years ago, my husband and I started renting our home on a weekly basis and quickly found that there was a demand for the shoulder seasons and the holidays. We get people here who are parents of military children that are coming to visit and want to stay under one roof, parents who are traveling with their children in the traveling sports leagues, business travelers who want to bring their families and make a vacation of it, or families who simply can't afford to take off 7 days from work. When we have renters, we move out, and we are not alone. Other owners move out of their homes, at least during the peak season. Still, others use their second homes as rentals, so when the renters aren't there, the owners are. So this brings me to the same question I asked 2 years ago. How will the restrictions be enforced when the home is owner-occupied versus renter-occupied? How will you even know the difference? I'm curious to know how many $25 trash citations have been issued in the city in the last year. Have they been issued but resulted in no change in behavior or being ignored? Because if we're not even forcing the $25 ones for the whole city, what's the point of adding punitive ones to the rentals? And how will you know if owners like myself are the ones leaving the trash cans out versus the guest? How cumbersome is that? And I say cumbersome because the recommendation sent to you states that it will make enforcement more timely and efficient and will increase the ability, to regulate short-term rental use without having to navigate the somewhat cumbersome court process. I'm kind of missing the due process part there. Make no mistake, the choice to stay in a home versus a hotel is based on preference and availability. If summer guests can't rent homes here, they'll go straight to the Outer Banks and Myrtle Beach, like Paige was saying. If parents with children in sports tournaments can't rent our homes during the tournaments, they'll go inland. Ordinance 241.2 only went into effect last November. Just 3 months later, in February, members of council were ready to send it back to you to address lessons learned. What lessons were learned from November to February? There is zero evidence to support that all of the adjustments made by homeowners and realty companies in the last year to conform to 241.2 did or did not work. There's no basis to go back to square one and debate each and every component, and that is what will happen. I even heard the word exit signs at the last council meeting. The ongoing hysteria that short-term rentals are bad for neighborhoods is anecdotal, and it's the exception rather than the rule. You state that they should not change the characteristic of the neighborhood, and 99% of the cases they don't. A judge in, I believe it was Austin, ruled that a family sitting at a dinner table in a residence is a family sitting at a dinner table in a residence, whether they're the homeowners or whether they are the renters. But the request to review this situation was sent to you with terminology that reads additional noise, trash, and other possible nuisances, and is asking you to assume that the negative connotations council sees on STRs is fact-based and not biased. Are trash cans really the problem? Just because you were asked to review these regulations doesn't mean you have to conclude that changes are needed at this point. you can determine that we should at least look at what has been done and see if it works first. Thank you for listening.
Madam Chair, the next speaker on this item is Joan Davis, followed by Gale Matala. Ms. Davis, please state your name for the record.
Joan is not here.
Sorry. Okay. Okay. So we'll move on to Erica Atkins. Next speaker is Erica Atkins. Okay. Ms. Atkins is a virtual speaker. Ms. Atkins, please pause for 3 seconds so we can unmute your mic. Please start by stating your name for the record. Thank you.
Hi, this is Erica Atkins. I agree with everything that the previous speaker said. I don't feel like there's been enough time to really gauge what effects the short-term rentals in this area have under the new rules and regulations. And I really think that there should be more time before any other changes are put into place.
Thank you.
Madam Chair, we do have Gale Matala here. Ms.
Come on up,
Matala?
please.
Good afternoon. I am Gale Matola. I live at 115 88th Street in Virginia Beach. I support the comments made by Mrs. Parker from the July 20, 2020 public hearing. The beach and Fort Story, located above Shore Drive, are daytime activities for visitors, not requiring overnight accommodations. Stewardship of history and the preservation of natural habitat is questioned as the Planning Commission and Zoning Commission first quietly and then outwardly tried to change a residential, once single-family neighborhood with some duplexes into 2 homes per small lot, often with different principal owners who can then rent out their properties with a conditional status of short-term rental. A case in point is a recent variance recommended for a builder from Richmond by zoning, who after the hearing told his prospective neighbors he planned to live in one home, but he already had a potential buyer for the second structure on the same lot. That means 2 principal owners per lot, both of who could apply for STR status. Given that there are 6 potential buildings going up on the same block of 88th Street, which was once the Cape Henry Syndicate, bought from the Cape Henry Park and Land Company in 1899 and platted in 1900 for single-family homes. The density of that block increases by how many people and how many cars. A second case, we just welcomed an employed couple of working age with their 3 younger children as they moved into the neighborhood. Isn't this what Virginia Beach motto of a city of a lifetime means? Are we losing residents? Had they not insisted that they have legal parking spaces instead of the illegal ones put in by the then owner of the 2 structures on the non-conforming land to meet parking requirements for SDR, stop. Those parking spaces were in the city-signed no parking zone at the corner of Oceanside, the Oceanside corner of 88th Street and Atlantic, making visibility obstructed to enter Atlantic Avenue. Then the neighborhood would have had to endure 4 bedrooms at 3 persons per bedroom? And how many cars if every 2 people had 1 car? The answer, 12 people, 6 cars. This summer, the corner duplex at 201 87th was approved, and the bedroom was approved also at 116 88th Street, and now 114 and A and B are for sale. They have 8 bedrooms. That could mean a total in 2 rentals per week of 48 people, i.e. 3 times 8 bedrooms times 2, meaning also a great over limit of cars. A traffic jam for delivery trucks meeting those looking for a free parking space to go to the beach occurs regularly in the summer now. The primary tourist area charges up to $10 for a few hours. The powers that were made the historic North End, especially above Shore Drive, 2015, a district based on the old beach overlay of 2005. Distinctly near hotels and motels and home renting rooms in the well-established Tory area that has been since 1906. But that is not the North End demographic. Many homes have passed down to children and grandchildren. The North End is a residential area with mostly permanent residents and those who come to enjoy their beach home for the summer. Traffic is another matter which I will not address. Again, the beach and Fort Story, a historic part of our city, that Cape Henry area, should be treasured and should not go to make commercial profit. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Madam Chair, the next speaker on this item is Mike Megji, followed by Chris Edel.
Good afternoon, Madam Chair, members of council. I'd like to thank all you on the hard work on this issue. I'm here today to point out we've spent years coming up with this current ordinance. And as owners, we've worked and planned our futures on the agreement that we came up with less than a year ago. As you know, restricting property rights of citizens by changing zoning laws is a taking. And by such, the government should justly compensate those owners if it does cause harm to those owners. And I hope we don't have to go down that road. I understand if you feel the need to further restrict short-term rentals with conditional use permits, as is your right. But I would like to see the data that the city has compiled for these changes. And I ask you to protect the existing rights of the grandfathered and by right STR owners. I know this issue has been contentious, but we all came together over the past several years with many, many meetings, public hearings, and we came up with a compromised ordinance that was thoroughly debated, voted on, and passed by both the Planning Commission and City Council. The new proposal would be a little like telling an owner of a duplex, if he owns a duplex zoned lot, that if you don't build that duplex in the next 2 years, you're going to lose that right. I just don't think that's the right way of going it. Also, giving zoning inspectors policing rights, allowing them to issue monetary fines without due process is a very slippery slope. I just don't see how that would be legal if it's not applied equally to all renters or to all property owners by that right. again, I just think it's a slippery slope and an enormous overreach by the government. Mr. Kemp said it would be easier for the city to enforce, but I believe due process should be shaded on the side of the owner and not on government. Like I said before, you have the right to restrict new STRs with conditional use permits, but again, I'd like to see that data, why you're restricting them, since we've just came up with an ordinance less than a year ago. But again, I'd like to stress that the current ordinance should be respected, and the rights of current STRs must be protected. Thank you very much.
Madam Chair, the next speaker on this item is Chris Edel, followed by Steve Bouchard.
Good afternoon, Madam Chairman, members of Planning Commission. My name's Chris Edel. I do have some handouts coming around. Hopefully, everybody will have a copy of. I'm here today primarily to speak with regards to Old Beach, where myself and have a partner, Bob Taylor, we have approximately 10 short-term rentals that are all approved by council and in operation. But I want to speak first, as you now have all, does everybody have one? Whitney, you got, okay. Are we missing one?
Yeah.
Okay.
Did you get one?
Let me get one more.
Is there two?
We got one. Kevin will share.
Yes.
Thanks.
Oh, you're right.
There's the packet.
Sorry.
We good?
Thanks,
Robin
Yep.
needs one. Thank you, Kevin.
Robin need one?
God, there's more than that.
Robin needs one. Oh, Robin needs one.
Okay, I've got another one.
I got plenty here to look at.
You good?
Oh, it is?
Yeah.
Does everybody have, I do have an extra one if we're missing one.
I'm fine.
Okay. Okay, so my company, VB Homes, has been building at the beach for over 30 years now. We were very active in Old Beach, particularly with the overlay that they put together. We partnered with the neighborhood to find a way to improve the character of the neighborhood, reduce density if possible. And I think we've put that together with Barbara Yates. And since that time, over the last 8 years, our company alone has invested over $10 million in redevelopment of that neighborhood. And what you have before you here is just a few examples, most of which are east of Baltic. But on the first page, you have 317 26th Street. This was a tired 50-year-old 6-unit apartment building that now is, to the right, you'll see the after, which is now 2 single-family homes. That 317 26th Street, that operated for probably over 30 years as a short-term rental. I know that from a fact by the person I bought it from. Mary Grace Thomas had ran that year-round and as well as short-term rentals. Below that, on 27th and Arctic, you can see it's an older 55-year-old 8-unit apartment complex. And we partnered with the George and Joyce Seco that you're going to hear from this afternoon as well, to take that from 8 tired apartments to 4 new single-family homes. And so those are just a few examples. The next page, one more example on 27th and Arctic. That was a 4-unit, again, very tired, blighted property that had been run down. And now there are 2 brand-new single-family homes on that property. So that's just an example of just a few that we've done, and there's certainly others, but I wanted to point that out. The next page, page 3, is, I call it Old Beach Revitalization Future Opportunities. These 2 properties, one at 417 24th Street, 10-unit apartment property, and then 416 24th is a duplex, both pretty old, tired properties owned by Mark Goldner. He couldn't be here today, but he asked me to share with you his thoughts on whether or not he would redevelop these properties. And he said to me, he said, Chris, I've had these properties for years, and if I'm not able to redevelop these as short-term rentals, I'm just going to keep them the way they are. I'm just going to keep bandaging them up. They won't go away. Why? Because there's no economic reason, there's no financial reason for him to improve these properties. So he wanted me to share that with you. And these are just a couple examples of others that he owns. He owns many properties. Page 4, 308 25th and a half. Again, you can see a very tired old duplex that I'm involved with and the owner of that property. The one below that, 2602 Baltic Avenue, which is a 50-year-old 5-unit apartment building facing Baltic. Again, all of these are Baltic East. But these are a couple properties that need to go away. They need to have brand-new single-family homes, and will have those, but they won't if we're going to get to be too restricted in what we can do with those. The next page is actually the Old Beach overlay. This is right out of the guidelines, the map here. And has everybody got one of those? Okay, great. Because I want to this is just a suggestion and something that we've talked about. And that is, if you see the orange line, which is highlighting Baltic Avenue, and this runs right through Old Beach. Most of this is Old Beach. But if you look from the orange line, Baltic Avenue east towards the ocean, most all of that is rental property and zoned that way. As you look from Baltic Avenue or west of Baltic Avenue, it becomes more residential, more year-round residents living there. So it somewhat splits the neighborhood, but the reasons are simple. It's because of the proximity to the resort and all the things that we want our guests coming here to enjoy and take advantage of. So one suggestion is to potentially use that as a development zone for having short-term rentals east or Baltic Avenue east that would not require conditional use, but that you would potentially require conditional use west of Baltic Avenue. And then the next page, which is just a summary that Bob Taylor and I put together of just some thoughts and some suggestions, ideas. First and foremost, the fact that Old Beach is being singled out as the only area in the beach that would require a short-term rental to be someone's principal residence is I just don't understand that at all. Effectively, we're saying we're not going to have any short-term rentals. There are many people, including myself, and again, I've told you, we've invested millions of dollars in Old Beach, and we don't own all these properties. We do sell some, but the ones that we do own, that's out the window then, for us, and many others that you're going to hear from here today. So I don't understand why that would make for a better experience, just because someone is their principal residence. Very likely, they're not even living there while it's going, the rental is taking place. So at any rate, that's one that certainly we don't agree with. And the next paragraph, noise and trash. Again, I don't think, as some of the other speakers have said, that there's really any evidence here that there's a real problem issue specifically with just short-term rentals in that regard. But hey, if we need to have more trash cans, we'll buy more trash cans. I mean, that's fine. That's going to help solve the issue. I'm not sure. It does state in the ordinance that the short-term rentals are a needed resource in certain areas of the city located in close proximity to venues, districts, and areas that generate high volume people or visitors. Where else in the world is it a better example than Old Beach? I mean, we're right down there in the resort area. I mean, that to me is a perfect place. And now we have the new sports complex. All of these families coming to the sports complex, sure, some are going to go to hotels, but not all want to go to hotels. Their families traveling here. They want a safe environment. They can come, maybe cook some meals in the house, and we provide that for them in very close proximity. The ordinance change about imposing fines, that's fine, because if you want to make bigger fines, we want to be the model example for professional managed short-term rentals. So we don't plan on breaking rules, and if we do and there's a larger fine, so be it. So we're okay with that. At the end there, opportunities to consider, certainly the OR Oceanfront Resort, I don't feel, and neither does my partner, feel like that should be even included as a conditional use permit. It's just going to bog down the system. There's hotels, motels all over the OR, and I don't feel like that should be even necessary. The second page there, that I did speak to just a little bit ago, and we're referring to it as an approved short-term rental zone. Again, Baltic Avenue East is what we're recommending, and that's where guests want to go. They want to be down there close to the resort area. Professional management. I can tell you all of our rentals are professionally managed. I think that is key. There are many people out there trying to either do it themselves, or maybe some of these people that live in their home may be trying to do it, but there's no substitute for professional management. And all of ours are that way, and I would suggest that maybe there's a way to incorporate that in the ordinance, that they need to be professionally managed. There was a workshop that you all had, and just talking about a couple points there. Parking, there was some discussion about garages. Okay, garages shouldn't be included. I can tell you in our properties that have garages that can fit a car, we use them. You know, in someone's home, you're going to put stuff in there, beach chairs, whatever, bikes, whatever it may be. But in a short-term rental, you don't need a place for all that stuff. So, you know, we might have a couple beach chairs, but that's about it. And so we do use them for parking. I would suggest that would be something that should count. Number of stays a week. You know, right now the ordinance is 2 stays a week. And I think that's a great compromise. Not everybody can afford a week's vacation. There's plenty of guests that want to come to Virginia Beach, but they can only do a long weekend, 3 or 4 days. And so I think it's totally appropriate to be able to allow for that. Number of occupants. You know, right now, currently 3 per bedroom. I know, speaking for myself, my partner and I would be fine if we limit the house itself to 10 or 15. You know, we're not looking for the big mega events. And that kind of goes to the next item, events. We don't want the big parties. You know, we actually prohibit parties in our homes. And so, again, that's just something that we're not interested in, and we're happy with if we want to reduce the number of people, if you think that would be helpful. Our typical profile of guests are families that are traveling here to the beach. One last thing on signage on the back.
Sorry, Chris.
Are we out? Okay.
We are. Sorry.
Eddie told me I had 10 minutes, but I guess we didn't have 10 minutes. It went by quick.
That was 10.
Oh, it was 10 minutes? Oh, my gosh. I'm sorry. All right. Thank you all.
Madam Chair, the next speaker on this item is Steve Bouchard, followed by Joyce Seco.
Good morning. Thank you for allowing me to speak. I have some handouts here, John. Name is Stephen Bouchard, Bouchard Homes, and related entities. Just want to speak about, in general, the short-term rental ordinance proposal. I feel like you should give it a time to season, give it time to see if it works. You know, we really haven't had a chance to see if the recently adopted ordinance is going to work or not. Anyhow, about 15 years ago, at the request of Karen Lastly, zoning administrator in the past, and Barbara Yates, I was asked to serve on the Old Beach Overlay District Committee to come up with a compatible residential redevelopment ordinance that would do away, or try to do away, in the proper way, of 3-story box duplexes, and successfully served on that committee. And I think we can say that we've seen the results of the resiliency and the transformation that's taken place in the Old Beach community by, number 1, the city, number 2, the community, and number 3, private business developers working together. And I appreciate the comment of it's like a pre-recorded speaker earlier. The best way to deal with this is when all the parties come together, partner together, listen to one another, and come up with agreeable solutions to a business enterprise, short-term rentals, that is a needed way for families to vacation. Some of them don't want to go to hotels. Some of them want to go to homes. I prefer to go to homes. My wife loves to go to homes, particularly in an environment like COVID. I wouldn't want to go to a hotel. I'd want to go to a house. It's just recently been cleaned, and it's safer for people. People feel better about it. anyway, over those last 15 years, since 2005 when that committee started and successfully produced a great ordinance, we have done tremendous amount of redevelopment. You'll see it in the packet. We also acquired a tremendous amount of rental properties. When we bought these properties, we took them up to the next level of standard. We didn't leave them as blighted properties. We brought them up. I will say that many of the properties that we purchased, though, very much were blighted properties. As Chris Edel mentioned, I echo what he shared today. Some of these properties we bought, there were rentals that rented for $600, $800 a month. There was a high turnover rate, and they were problematic. Since I've entered the short-term rental business, it hasn't been that long, I can tell you that the management company that I have, same one Chris Edel has, stellar performance. Had no problems. They are proactive. Matter of fact, the management company that we use and hire lives right in the Old Beach community. I mean, he walks, rides his bike through the community, checks on the properties that he manages. So I think management, and I think you agree, is a critical component. The proper proactive management of these properties through a professional company. So as I was saying, we've recently entered the short-term rental business, hired NAV LLC, lives in the Old Beach community, and have found that the short-term rentals have less management problems, less calls than our year-round rentals have. We're having a much better time with a lot less problems with short-term rentals from a management perspective. And the spirit of me being up here today is the spirit of partnership. When I served on the committee in 2005, I embraced what they wanted to do. I've been working in that community since then, buying rental properties in that community since then. And I see myself as a resident, not of Old Beach, I live in Lincoln Park, but a resident of the city that really cares about that community. I don't want to see that community go down. I think actually what's happened is it's going up. And the short-term rental business is helping that. I don't see that it's hurting it. I've asked the question with an open mind. How many problems have you seen in the Old Beach community? This is from the management company I was referring to. Hasn't seen a problem in the Old Beach community. Hasn't had to, he can speak, he's speaking later. I'm not sure he's had to evict one person, had to have the police to a property. So we appreciate the desire, but I just hope that we'll open up to what the reality really is, come up with a viable solution through partnering with the community, businesses, and the city that's working hard on it to have a solution that we can go on with. One of the ideas that came up was having a short-term rental sign on each of the short-term rental properties. That if somebody does have a problem, they can call the management company very quickly. This would be a uniform, attractive, standardized sign that we could have throughout Old Beach. If you have a problem, just call the management company on the sign. Again, manager lives in the neighborhood. One of the things that I've seen since I've entered the business, the expenditures to keep these properties at the highest level, they're up there. I mean, we're spending some serious money to take landscaping to the next point, to the next level. Decks, any kind of amenities that people might want. We're spending a lot more money than we do on year-round rentals, and we need to. Some of the suggestions, as I mentioned before, what about a task force, a committee, to come together, guys like myself, Chris Edel, others, we'll meet with the community of the Old Beach, be glad to meet with them, and come up with something that works. For example, anything east of Baltic Avenue with a Baltic Avenue address east to the ocean, maybe that's a by right short-term rental. If it's in some of the more, year-round residential streets, maybe that's a conditional use permit. Consider giving it some time for this ordinance to really sink in and see if it works. I really don't think we've given it enough time to see if it works. And if it doesn't work, I think we can find some solutions to make it work. In the spirit of partnership, our company just wants to be a model, an example for how to manage it, to be responsible, willing to give our phone number out. I've met with a few of the planning commissioners. We're here. I mean, we live close, want to talk to us. Management company's not doing it. We're here. We're available, and we'll be available and continue to be so. I just want to close by pointing out two properties on this handout I gave you. If you could take a look. I think on your handout, a little different than my handout as far as the way it's laid out. Take a look at page 6. And then we'll go to page 7 after that. We bought this property at 501, 504 25th Street and 2500, 2512, 25th and a half Street when we bought it. Guy was running a gambling operation there. I knew it because I knew somebody who kept going to it. It's a friend of mine I grew up with. And he was running a black market gambling operation there, and he had 5 or 6 little shack units. I guess the people that would come and gamble there would stay there. We bought this property, turned it into 4 beautiful houses. Now, we sold these houses, but nevertheless, this has really enhanced the neighborhood in a dynamic way. And then if you go to 7, this is a property many of you have seen across from the old beach, very nice middle school, on 24th Street and Mediterranean Avenue. This individual that I bought it from, he owned these 2 houses and had a lot of people packed in these houses. Way more units than what we put back on it. We put 6 units back on it. We did again sell these, but this is an example of how you can take multi-units, reduce the density, and you can either sell them, you can rent them year-round, or related to this specific meeting today, you can do short-term rentals. We own a property at 406 23rd Street recently, and I thank you. You all approved a short-term rental application for us. Has 3 units on it. If I see it makes sense, I'm going to tear that old building down, put 2 units on it, brand new homes, and might be a way for me to redevelop a neighborhood that Barbara Yates back in 2005 was proactively and actively, eager to redevelop with the community. So anyway, I appreciate you listening. Do give it a chance. I think there's an opportunity to have a win-win for everybody in this situation. Thank you.
Thank you.
Gee,
Yes, I'm sorry. Dave?
Mr. Bouchard, don't come back up, but I wanted to respond to something that you said. I think it's something that bears, just repeating and a lot of thought. I would urge you, I'm a sucker for landscaping. I don't think it's that complicated stuff, but it makes an enormous difference. And to you and Mr. Edel and to the other folks who do this, I know that you do a good job of it. And I would just like, for the general good to say, if you take a property and you make it the sparkling property on the street, it's very difficult to be villainized. And a lot of the people who might otherwise criticize or complain or have a problem with anything that you do are pretty easily disarmed when they contrast their own place to the sparkling house on the street, or houses, as the case may be. So, I appreciate your bringing that up. I do think that landscaping, particularly intensive, well-designed, appropriate landscaping, can make a big difference in the appearance of these properties. And I think that, that makes a giant difference in all of our communities, not just Old Beach or the oceanfront or Shore Drive or anywhere else. So I appreciate you bringing that piece up, and I repeat it because I think it's something that we all ought to keep in mind. And in the development community particularly, that's a difference maker and something I think can kind of help carry the day. So, for what it's worth, thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Landfair?
Madam Chair, the next speaker on this item is Joyce Seco, followed by George Seco.
Hi, I'm Joyce Seco, and I'm 70 years old, and I'm retired. And my dream has just about come true, because I owned, when you get the flyer, the property in the top picture, which was 2606 and 2608. And it was about a 50-year-old apartment building that was really getting to be a chore to keep fixed. And I worked with Chris Edel, and we developed it into 4 single-family homes. And the landscaping is beautiful on those homes, I might add. And I kept 2 for myself, and they are leased yearly. I don't do weeklies. But in the future, I want to. And I don't want to be an owner-occupied at this time. I will in the future, probably in about 5 years. I plan on living in one, and I'll either do weeklies in one, or I might live in mine for 9 months and do weeklies for the 3 months in the summer and travel. And that's really my dream. I've worked for over 25 years keeping this property in shape and then developing it. And I have a daughter in New York who will eventually owner-occupy the second home. And she's the only daughter I have left. I have 1 grandson and 1 great-granddaughter. And that's my dream, to have my family here, something to hand it down to them. But with the new ordinance, I couldn't really do the weeklies like I'd like to until that point. So, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Madam Chair, the next speaker on this item is George Cico, followed by Frank Remakers.
Good afternoon. I'm George Seco. I have the property on 400 and 402 26.5 Street. And originally, as we said before, it was 8 apartment units. We did summer rental for 25 years. And we only had 3 parking places on the whole thing. We coped. Everybody, we worked with it, and didn't have a big problem with it. Nobody really complained, even our neighbors didn't. So we decided to redevelop it because of, the lifetime of the building was pretty much, it was its lifetime, 50 years. Like my wife said, we're planning on living in one and sometime rent the other one out for short-term rental. The way it stands now, I won't be able to probably do that. But the proposed, the change now. And the thing about the parking is that we've had construction on the Hyatt on 27th and Atlantic, and it's not complaining about the parking, but that since they've been all summer long, they can't use the parking lot at the Hyatt because that's being used for the summer. So they come down, the contractors are parked all along Arctic Ave and 27th, right in front of our places, which there hasn't been a problem, but I don't know about the problem with the parking with the short-term rental. If they had more than 2 cars, if they had 3 cars, there's still room to park if you want to on the street. It's a matter of just opinion on where you're going to park the cars. And there's garages too, which I don't understand why you can't use a garage as a 3rd parking space. You got room for 3 cars, not 2 in the driveway. And I don't know, it's been, I just don't understand this, how we're going to have to go through all this again. But anyways, that's my statement. Thank you for hearing me.
Thank you very much.
Madam Chair, the next speaker on this item is Frank Remakers, followed by Eddie Bourdon.
I've got some papers to hand out. Brochures. Go to you. Yes, sir. Thank you. Hello. Thank you. Does everybody have a copy? coming your way.
We do now.
Okay. Our family purchased 2 residential homes, 318 27th Street. First of all, excuse me, I'm Frank Ramakers III. I reside at 429 26th Street in Virginia Beach in the Old Beach neighborhood. Our family purchased 2 residential homes, 318 27th Street, and built in 1935, which you can see on the second page. It's the gray home. And 429 26th Street, built in 1939. Both homes have been placed in the Virginia Beach Historical Register with bronze plaques attached to both homes. The homes have been remodeled and preserved to the original construction dating back to the 1930s, thus preserving the Old Beach neighborhood. They are kept in immaculate condition to appease our guests and to develop superb curb appeal for the Old Beach neighborhood. 429-26 is my permanent residence and is shared during the summer months with guests who visit Virginia Beach and surrounding area. 318 27th Street is a short-term rental year-round, 365 days a year. We also have a 10-unit apartment complex located on 26th Street, which is kept in immaculate condition. Every single blade of grass is cut perfectly. It is our neighborhood, my 3 children, my wife, and my parents also all reside in this neighborhood, and it is important to us that everything is kept perfect. I also host numerous homes in the Old Beach neighborhood. If you would look at and I use the term host because I interact with the guests to be sure their visit to our city is excellent, is flawless. Every guest, when they enter the home, receive a binder, or it's a little binder like this. If you look on the last page, you'll see what it states. It says, first of all, let me back up here for a second. Upon the arrival, the guests receive this binder and they agree to the rules and regulations which they are stated here in the binder, and they also agree to them electronically when they make the reservation through Vrbo or Airbnb. I just want to publicly state these rules and regulations which the guest agree to. It says, "Hello guest, thank you for choosing our home. Welcome to Virginia Beach, the beach life, relax and enjoy. The check-in time is 4, checkout is 11. Please make note of these times as our cleaning staff needs this time to thoroughly clean and sanitize the home. Especially during this time, COVID-19, our guests appreciate the homes because they are thoroughly sanitized. We do a CDC recommended cleaning in the homes. Your home is in a residential area and your neighbors reside here all year. Please understand you are here to relax, or excuse me, we understand you are here to relax and enjoy our beautiful beaches, but please respect their privacy and the Virginia City Ordinance of Quiet Hours from 10 p.m. to 7 a.m. Virginia Beach City violation of these quiet hours will result in immediate departure. I have had hundreds of reservations through our homes and the homes that I also host, and I have not had any problems, 0 problems with the guests. At this current time, I have over 100 guests. My phone does not ring. So I don't understand why the ordinances must be changed because I have 0 issues at the present time. Down at the bottom, parking. Designated parking is provided for you. You may park 2 vehicles in the driveway, 1 vehicle in the garage. Please do not block the sidewalk as it is disrespectful to the pedestrians and our neighbors. You will be towed if blocking the sidewalk. If you need additional parking, please contact somebody, me, and I can direct you to public parking. There's a public parking garage on 25th Street. I direct individuals there and I tell them it's $20 a night. New York City's $100 a night, so. And that's where they park at if necessary. But the parking is controlled thoroughly. If you guys have any questions, I appreciate your time.
Great. Thank
Yes.
you very much.
Thank you, appreciate it.
Madam Chair, the next speaker on this item is Eddie Bourdon, followed by Samuel Jones.
Thank you, Mr. Landfair. Madam Chair, members of the Commission, for the record, Eddie Bourdon, Virginia Beach Attorney. I don't have a handout. The first thing I want to talk about is I want to say that Mr. Maggie's comments on item 18, because I and my clients don't have any problems with the fines, but his one comment was spot on, not to say his other ones weren't. But the fact that we're putting a scarlet letter on short-term rentals by having these fines that only apply to short-term rentals doesn't make sense to me, because I guarantee you I haven't asked Mr. Kemp. But I guarantee you, we have a lot more problems in this city with code compliance with long-term rentals, okay? No doubt about it. So the fines shouldn't just apply to short-term rentals, they should apply to any property that is rented. You know, because short-term rentals are not anywhere close to the problem of compliance as long-term rental, no, the yearly rental, you know, and that's, that's not even completely, not arguable. Okay, on number 19, the grandfathered, or I consider them, they're legally non-conforming. I'll just simply say that everything else that deals with legal nonconformance, I'm pretty certain goes through the zoning administrator, the Board of Zoning Appeals to court. I'm not really sure why the planning director is the one making the decisions on these, on the 2,600 short-term rentals that are grandfathered or legally nonconforming. Seems a little bit odd to me, but anyway. And what constitutes abandonment? There's a lot of different tentacles to what constitutes abandonment as well. And there's legal precedent on that issue when it comes to nonconforming use and the abandonment of a nonconforming use. And I think that's why it belongs in the zoning administrator, BZA, quasi-judicial BZA, and court. As for the changes to the ordinance, the findings, characteristics of the neighborhood. Mr. Grockmall, it's a false narrative that he put out there, because what is residential? Short-term rentals are residential, long-term rentals are residential, and short-term is 30 days, less than 30 days under your ordinance, and owner-occupied, they're all residential. Now, maybe there's a distinction between owner-occupied, single-family, and rental, whether it's short-term or long-term. I would submit that short-term, in the vast majority of cases, is a better situation when it comes to the upkeep, maintenance, et cetera, of the property than long-term, especially in areas like Old Beach, which have needed for decades redevelopment. So characteristics, if a neighborhood or a portion of a neighborhood like Baltic East, which is probably 75% rental and has been forever, what's the characteristic? It's not single-family, owner-occupied, which I would submit probably is close to the majority and may well be the majority on those areas west of Baltic in Old Beach. The idea that Old Beach should be dealt with differently than Lakewood or Sea Pines or maybe even Shadow Lawn, although Shadow Lawn is different. I don't understand why we're doing this part of the Oceanfront Resort and not Lakewood to the south and Sea Pines to the north of 31st Street. But anyway, and I said this at the workshop under number 4, this needed. Needed is a comp plan term. It shouldn't say needed. We shouldn't be in the business, other than in a comp plan, of suggesting what we need or we want. It should be compatible resource, not a needed resource. Although it's needed in Old Beach, or the portions that we've talked about. It's also needed on 21st and 22nd Street, as I've said previously, Norfolk Avenue, other main thoroughfares. Arctic and Baltic, no matter what you say, the city's done a nice job with trying to calm the traffic, but that north-south corridor of Arctic and Baltic, they're going to always be heavily trafficked. And so it's different than once you get west of Baltic. Ran into Barbara Yates. I was going to relate this at the workshop and didn't have time. At the vet about a month and a half ago, and like Mr. Bouchard and Mr. Edel, been involved with Old Beach from a legal standpoint with staff and Karen Lasley, et cetera. It's been a great process over the years. And the first thing Barbara said is, can you believe how great Old Beach is looking? I can't believe that Arctic Avenue looks as good as it does. And I said, when Barbara's down in Edenton, I said, Barbara, yeah, it has been fantastic. You do realize that short-term rentals has been a big part of that Arctic, because Arctic and Baltic, just like 21st and 22nd, always have been a thorn in the city's side in terms of how do we get that to redevelop. And putting more density was the old way, and it turns out we can do it with less density and because of short-term rentals. And she said, I don't like short-term rentals, but I got to say, Arctic Avenue is looking extremely good, and I didn't think I'd live to see that happen. So it's this idea that the chairperson said this morning, that Old Beach is being hit hard by short-term rentals, is I'm not not seeing that whatsoever. And we're seeing a reduction in the number of units on a lot of these. And with the occupancy restrictions that apply to short-term rentals that do not apply to people renting for more than 30 days in the same neighborhood. And that's in here too. Some of this language is a little questionable. I think some time needs to be spent on working on it, but not at all, we're not at all opposed to the fines, and really not particularly opposed to the stuff in 19, although again, I don't think it's as good as it should be. On the Old Beach part, it looks to me like it's a solution in search of a problem. There are 2,600 short-term rentals that are grandfathered, legally non-conforming. There have been 196 applications filed for short-term rental CUPs since the ordinance went into effect. That's 7.5% of the ones that already exist. The short-term rentals that have been approved by council, 62. That's 3% of the short-term rentals that already exist. Statistics that I have that were presented to RAC and some other people by the city said there's been 63 short-term rental applications in the OR district. There's no OR district in Old Beach. I don't know where those have been because I haven't seen them. And as I've said previously, why a short-term rental CUP is needed in the OR district is beyond me. Doesn't make any sense at all. It isn't a quote-unquote neighborhood as everybody uses that term. So it doesn't make a lot of sense. But most importantly, there are only 28 short-term rental applications, 1% of those that exist, that have been submitted and I believed acted upon or in the process of being acted upon in all of Old Beach, 28. That's my point of a solution in search of a problem. That's 1% of the existing short-term rentals. And then Old Beach is just a small subset, as I said earlier, of the oceanfront area, and I don't know why it's being dealt with separately from Lakewood, Sea Pines, or potentially Shadow Lawn. Also, city statistics show there of the short-term rentals in the city, there are 29% in the beach district, 29%. Now, Princess Anne has the largest because of Sandbridge, but that's still not an overwhelming percentage. Old Beach is finally experiencing at a more rapid pace a long overdue and long encouraged by the city redevelopment. It's an organic redevelopment. City has helped, but it's mainly the investments that are being made by not just the folks that are here, but there are others as well. Ken Hunt comes to mind. Due in large part to short-term rentals and many with an accompanying reduction in density. And certainly a better control over who's there and what they're doing, what they're spending. They're going to spend more money at the resort because they're here for a vacation. And you or I would come down and stay on Baltic or Arctic or 21st or 22nd Street or Norfolk Avenue for 4 or 5 days or a week. But somebody might not really want to live on those heavily trafficked streets 365. It's different from back in the area where there's not a lot of traffic. And so as a commission, as a city, we should be a little bit more thorough in how we try to, we don't want to kill the golden goose, and that's what this really is in some parts of the city. Not necessarily in Croatan, not necessarily at the north end, but here in these areas that have been blighted and for years needed redevelopment, it's a great asset. And truly, the same is true for Lakewood and the other areas there. We should not be putting a scarlet letter on something that there's no evidence is a big problem. Lastly, the idea of by right, owner-occupied, makes no sense to me. Okay, they just need to use permit too, because what if you have, some people it's great, but if you got I had one in Croatan, and I won't get into all the details, but bottom line, a lady with a baby by a new husband, a 13-year-old daughter, they were renting out rooms in their house. This is going back 4 or 5 years ago. I had everybody on my block want to know, what can we do? This is crazy. Why would they let people move in a house for a weekend with their infant and a 13-year-old daughter? So it's, owner-occupied short-term rentals can be great, don't get me wrong. But it's not a panacea. It's not a panacea. It should be governed by use permit as well.
Thank you.
Thank you. Be happy to answer any questions.
No, thank you, though. We'll be back.
Madam Chair, the last registered speaker on this item is Samuel Jones.
Thank you.
Good afternoon. I hope you guys can hear me. I appreciate the opportunity to speak. I guess I was 22 years old. I left Virginia Beach and spent 6 years of my life commercially fishing in the North and South Pacific. I started a family in '98 and bought a triplex on 27th Street that same year. Since then, I've moved to the 500 block of 26th Street. So I've been living in Old Beach now for 22 years. I'm late to this party, but I spent last night watching the July 8th meeting with the Planning Commission. I'm a small business owner. By day, I wear a tool belt. So in reality, the properties I own in Old Beach are my retirement. One of the concerns I am addressing you guys, I guess it would be Agenda 20. I really, in the future, my triplex is rented yearly at the moment, and has been since 2001. At some point, I may want to look at doing short-term rental. These gentlemen to my right and in the back, they are obviously having success. The Old Beach overlay has made my neighborhood better. Some may say I live in a blighted home. I live in a little 3-bedroom, 1-bath that was built like in '54. I'm not ripping it down. I like my backyard, and I'm going to continue to update it. In the past year, my wife came down with breast cancer, and through this whole transition, our dream is possibly to rent our home and maybe go to France for a couple weeks in the summertime. But what I see, if you really want to look at Old Beach and look at really who owns the properties and the number of short-term rentals, the number of annual rentals, I think a lot of the tax records show that a lot of LLCs own a lot of the properties. I would fair to say that the permanent homeowners are in the minority. It is a very cool little neighborhood. I play tennis on 26th Street a couple times a week. I surf out front. But with that said, I have 4 short-term rentals between on Mediterranean, right in the 600 block. And the families that do rent those homes walk past my house every day going to the beach. And it's kind of nice seeing people walk and go to the beach. This morning I stopped a couple, and I'm presently painting and redoing the hardwood floors in my rental on 27th. And they're doing 3 days. They're spending $300 a night. They're from Richmond. They're actually staying in not a very nice unit. So we have a pretty big, we got these brand new homes that Chris Edel has developed, and then we still have some older stuff that's considered blighted. That may never go away, or maybe not transition out as soon as the public wants. So I want you guys to consider and respect the older residents and the possibility of being able to use the properties that we've invested in for future. And there should never be a cap on the number of short-term rentals or weekly rentals, because even if it's east or west of Baltic, I think, excuse me. And then on Agenda 20, I think that, again, I hope you guys take into consideration any type of future investments and future people wanting to do short-term rentals and not alienate them if the numbers, if there's too many in the neighborhood. I honestly, as a resident, we are different than Chatelawn, we're different than North End. We are very close to the hub of the oceanfront, and at the moment it looks like we're doing a good job of creating a nice neighborhood for people, short-term rentals, weekly rentals, and even annual renters and homeowners to live in. So, anyway, thank you.
Thank you.
Dee,
Yes. Oh, Jay.
excuse me for a second. I didn't catch your name at the beginning. I'm
Samuel Jones.
Mr. Jones. You are not late to this party. I thought your comments were very valuable, and I also want to say we wish the best for your wife and your whole family.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
Madam Chair, at this time, we'd like to ask if there are any other speakers present either in the lobby or in the chamber that would like to speak. Anyone? No one in the lobby. Okay. It would appear that there are no more known speakers.
Okay. That's it. Well, I think we will close this now and open up our planning commissioner.
You want to start with 18 first? Start with 18
Yeah,
first?
well, let's close it, and then we'll open up for discussion, and we'll move through these one at a time. And do we want to wait for Mr. Edmund to come, or we want him to catch up?
I'd like to make a comment if I could, to staff anyway. Don't shoot me. I have no problem with the fines, but Mr. Burdon brought up a good point. Why are we just picking on short-term rentals when there's a lot of other rentals out there in the city that have problems, long-term rentals? I mean, I know why we're picking on short-term rentals, but have we thought about that, about long-term rentals too?
It's my understanding that because of the turnaround on short-term rentals and that the regular zoning enforcement process of a 30-day notice and then going to the Board of Zoning Appeals for some of these issues is a bit cumbersome, and by the time someone gets through that process, the season is over and they are no longer renting, so they're in compliance. So part of it is the ability to, as allowed by state code, for certain zoning violations, they can become civil penalties, which is what this is going for. We use this currently also for, we have the ability to utilize this for signage as well. But this follows what is permitted by state code.
Okay.
Now, as far as this is a subset in the zoning ordinance. There isn't a subset in the zoning ordinance that talks about rentals. So this is going in based on the utilization of a property as a short-term rental.
And to follow up real quick to that, why are we including Sandbridge in this? I mean, I know they're part of the ordinance, but I mean, why would we include Sandbridge? Aren't they part of like their own little entity down there and
so
forth?
The zoning ordinance requires that anyone operating a short-term rental comply with section 241.2, which includes the portions that deal with grandfathering and also the performance standards. So,
okay, I'll just ask the question. Okay.
All right, so we're going to start with 18. And do we have any comments on this one? Or
Great.
you, Dave?
I echo David's comments. That seems to me rather unfair. I mean, I heard your explanation. I just don't know that I buy it, very frankly. I do think we ought to enforce far more in the city than we do. But it just strikes me that we have different standards for, does it make a difference if you're violating the law in some way, whether a renter is there for 31 days or they're there for 7? I mean, I don't know that that's particularly fair. I will say at the outset too, I thought I've heard everything, but this is a very educational session today, and I listened to every single word. But I'm more discombobulated than I was when we began, and I have objections based on what I have heard to everything. Ms. Atkinson, I was perfectly okay with the grandfathering until
I know.
Ms. Atkinson says, well, wait a minute. What, does it run with the land or doesn't it? Never thought about that. So if you decide you feel like living in your own house instead of renting it for a couple of years, you can't go back to renting again. I don't know how that makes any sense. In any case, so I got a whole bunch of objections that I'm not going to support anything today, because I think Mr. Weiner, I hope anyway, if I've read him correctly, shares my view that there's way more going on here than we can make up on the fly. I think this is rushed.
I'm going to interrupt you, and I'm going to let the attorney speak for 1 second. It doesn't happen all the time, but.
It happens. I get it all day long, so.
That you all understand about civil penalties. Right now, if you have a zoning violation, which is what these are, when you violate the zoning ordinance, you are charged with an unspecified misdemeanor. It's a misdemeanor. When they say, have you ever been charged with a crime, you have to put down yes, because it's a misdemeanor. Now, for zoning, you cannot go to jail. That's why it's an unclassified or an unspecified misdemeanor. But it's a fine up to $2,500. $2,000?
It's $2,500.
$2,500. Anyway, so we feel that's a bigger penalty on someone than someone going through the system and having a civil penalty. They still have due process. We send you what looks like a summons. It just says the violation is this, the penalty is this, the $200. If you want to pay it, you go down to the treasurer's office and you pay it. And it goes into planning's budget under short-term rentals, under civil penalties. If we didn't do this, then people would have to go through the regular process, which could potentially give them a misdemeanor. No, we don't want to give them a misdemeanor on their record forever for some of this stuff. This, we felt, was a way to make it easier on people who have violations, because a lot of the things are not earth-shattering. But there are other things that also have civil penalties in the zoning ordinance. Signs are civil penalties. There's a philosophical issue.
We don't enforce the sign thing, just so you know. We talked about that earlier. But
Yes, but they are. And there's a philosophical debate between which is better, civil penalties to get people to do things or criminal penalties. And it's philosophical more than it's concrete. We have looked at going to civil penalties for everything, but many people feel that criminal penalties are things that require people to more readily bring their property into compliance. If they have, variance requirements, or they have setback issues, or they have other things. So that's why we went to civil penalties, because it was just a fine. Now, it is only $200. If you have a regular fine from a criminal violation, it could be up to, I think it's $2,000, but that's why it was done. It's not something that's brand new or never been thought of, and you still get due process. Because if you decide, hey, I'm not paying that $200, I'm just not paying it, come on over to court. Tori, not me, but Tori will be there, and she will prosecute you just like it was a criminal violation, except her standard, the standard for proving it is lower for the city.
Okay.
I thank you for that. I still, share David's view. I just don't know that that's consistent, and so I have a different view of it. So, anyway, thank you. Dean.
Yes.
I agree with Mr. Redmond. I thought it was great to hear from the speakers. Full disclosure, Mr. Jones back there, I went to high school with him. So he grew up in Virginia Beach. He went to First Colonial High School, as I did. And I am sure that he's surprised at how revitalized that area is today compared to what it was back in the 80s. It's very different. And hearing the speakers, I mean, they've taken places. I mean, you look at these pictures. They took places that were 8 units and converted them into 2 houses. The before and after pictures, I mean, this is, short-term rentals have been the economic engine of that area. They have completely transformed that area. I am torn with short-term rentals in other areas, like your traditional neighborhood, but here, close to the beach, I'm not. I mean, I think that what's happened over there is great, I agree with Mr. Redmond. I don't know that there's anything in here you can support today. I think this thing's being rushed through. I think that more thought needs to be given to it.
All right, so I'm, no disrespect, but we're gonna do 18, because I just don't want to
Okay.
not,
We gotta do 18 first.
we got to do 18. We got to do them separately, and
Okay.
I would just, so that we can focus, because we,
Penalties. Oh, no.
so we can
Give me comments.
focus on
Okay.
specifically, you know, kind of where we are and what we're addressing. Robin?
So, I understand the argument for 18. However, since it is currently a criminal penalty, which I disagree with, I do intend to support the transition to a civil penalty, at least in the interim.
Perfect, great. Mike? No, I'm just, because we're gonna, yes, John?
The whole thing on whether it's civil or criminal penalty, it doesn't make that much difference to me, other than the fact that enforcement is the whole thing. And I can't see that this, changing this penalty is gonna make anything, you know, I don't know where the enforcement is gonna come from. I just don't think we have the staff or whatever to enforce it regardless of what it is. So, I mean, the civil penalty versus criminal penalty, I mean, it's a minor penalty, so that's fine with me. I don't mind that, but, you know, what is the people that have put this issue up, what method of enforcement have they come up with to help enforce any type of penalty? Because we don't have the staffing and all to do it now, evidently.
Mr. Horsley, you're correct. Currently, right now, we are working as best we can with what we have, and we do have 3 additional positions that have been kicked free from the hiring freeze to allow us to focus on this, as well as our contract with host compliance. So, Mr. Kemp and I was in a meeting with the city manager discussing other ways to add to our enforcement capability, whether it be a third party or to figure out a way to fund the ability to have someone to be out there on the weekends to go and enforce these requirements. So it's not something idle. We're not just tossing the words out. We're also working as far as staffing and finding other solutions that are available to us to do the enforcement.
I mean, I see this with other things, not just short-term rentals, enforcement of other things. I have people complaining to me all the time about various things and said, why didn't the city take care of this? And I said, well, I guess we just don't have the people to enforce the code. So regardless of what penalties we put up there, I think that's something that somebody on council or somewhere has got to come up with a way to provide more enforcement to you folks.
Well, since we are addressing, yes, Mike?
Well, I certainly think civil penalties makes more sense than a criminal penalty on this kind of thing, and I think we can support that.
Great.
I would support that.
All right, so do I have a motion for 18?
I'll move for approval of 18.
Okay. Great. Marshall, will you call for the question, please?
Sure. If you're in favor of the motion, say yes, and if you're opposed, say no. Mr. Alcaraz?
Yes.
Mr. Graham?
Yes.
Mr. Horsley?
Yes.
Mr. Inman?
Yes.
Ms. Klein?
Yes.
Mr. Redmond?
No.
One second. Mr. Weiner?
Yes.
Ms. Oliver?
Yes.
By recorded vote of 7-4 and 1 against, agenda item 18 is hereby recommended for approval by the Planning Commission.
Great. All right, that went smoothly. Let's go with 19. All right, so now we're going to talk about number 19, the revocation of grandfathering status and city council's finding regarding to short-term rentals. So,
I'll start this one. I'm completely done with this one. After listening to everybody out there, I really appreciate the input. It was really good information. I would make a motion to strike item 2 completely, required findings, and the minimum I would support on grandfather would be 60 months.
Wait,
How many months?
Wait, what?
60 months.
60, 5 years?
Instead of 48.
60.
60, 60,
5 years.
5 years. 5 years. 5 years, 60 months. Okay. I mean, that would be the minimum I would support for
You wanna put
grandfathering.
it- All right, hold on.
That's
Slow
just
down.
me. Y'all
I
can,
know, but,
I agree with that.
so you want 5 years,
5 years
Okay.
for grandfathering and completely strike item 2 required findings.
item 2 as in numeral 2, or the whole section?
It says item 2,
Look at.
the whole paragraph,
Excuse
the whole
Required
paragraph.
findings.
Yeah.
me. You were like,
Item 2, items 1, 2, 3, and 4.
you want all of those gone?
Yes,
Okay,
that's just me.
that's just me.
No, it's me too.
Oh, okay.
Okay.
Goodness. So you don't want aesthetically pleasing parking? I'm just asking.
Yeah.
I mean, because you can pick and choose. You don't have to be blanket. I'm just,
I understand.
I'm just sort of
My opinion, none of it's
facilitating-
thought through at all.
I agree.
It's just not thought through. It needs to be, we need to sit down and think about what's going on here.
well, see, I don't have any problem with aesthetically pleasing parking. I think that's a good thing.
Well, I mean, that's fine if you wanna fix it.
Vote against it.
I mean,
Yeah, that's, if you wanna keep
I
item
mean,
2.
that seems to be the crux of our problems here, is parking, because that's the only thing we have, and so we're debating on whether or not we want gravel, 8 feet of this, does it look like that, what's the apron look like? So if we're hanging our hats on parking, we might as well make it look good. Yes,
I agree with that.
thank you.
However, be that as it may, as I've said before, I share Dave's view that an awful lot of this is just not very well thought through and requires greater consideration. Factually, though, and substantively, I don't like the idea that if you choose to live in a house for 2 years that you were previously renting, then you lose the ability to then rent it again because you choose to live in your own house. It just doesn't seem to me to make a lot of sense. So I'm not going to support it. I'm going to, if you want to make a motion, I consider what you said an improvement, and I'll be happy to support your motion. In the end, however, I'm going to oppose the entire concept of it because I don't think that's fair to property owners. Thanks.
Yes, Robin?
If I get granted a conditional use permit for my home now, and then.
Fine?
My-
I have to
I'm
abstain.
sorry, just trying to.
for my home now, I'm not applying, and then I decide to live in it, what happens to, and I'm not grandfathered or legally non-conforming, what happens to that permit?
I don't think anything, yes, okay.
First, I love how you keep directing these questions at D, and I would encourage you to keep doing it.
I'll turn to K.
I'm rather enjoying that.
Your CUP, you got a CUP, right?
Yes.
Okay, your CUP is good for 5 years. And then it will just simply disappear unless you come and renew it.
Okay, so I think that that is very well in line with your 5-year suggestion, yeah.
That, excuse me,
No,
but
go
doesn't
ahead.
that CUP, don't you, if you do something, if you have some type of a vested right in it within that 5 years, doesn't that make it stay? You don't have to have it completed in 5 years.
No, you have to, your CUP is specifically conditioned on it only lasting 5 years, so there is no vested right argument. You knew you had it for 5 years, that's all.
In this case,
These are grandfathered.
so,
No, we're talking about hers.
Yes.
I was there.
Non-grandfathered.
so, Mr. Horsley, so in this case, a conditional use permit, as Ms. Klein is referring to, has a very specific condition stating that it lasts for 5 years. If you were talking about other conditional use permits, yes, the discussion is a different, but it's laid out in the ordinance that way.
So if it's vacant for 5 years, you've essentially lost your right for grandfathered property and would need, under your suggestion.
No.
No.
No, correct, under Mr. Wiener's suggestion.
Right, under Mr. Wiener's suggestion,
Under Mr. Wiener's suggestion, just take the 2
and make it a 5.
make it a 5.
Which would be the regular length of time for a
For a
conditional
CUP.
use permit.
Yeah. Mike?
I actually support all of this. there's going to be subjectivity, there has to be subjectivity. You can't, as Kay explained early on or in our informal session, you can't objectify every single thing. There's judgment calls to be made by us. We're called on to make judgments about density and whether there's too much density of short-term rentals so that it destroys the neighborhood concept, the neighborhood feel, the benefit of living in a non-transient neighborhood. So that's what that's about. That's what two of those items in number 2 are about. We've been concerned for many months now about, we've seen I think, a higher volume of applications than we ever really expected around the city. And we're all of a sudden going like, whoa, well, wait a minute. What's this going to do to these neighborhoods? Everybody's thinking about today, Old Beach. I'm talking about all the things we've been concerned about, some parts of the Shore Drive neighborhood. So I'm not offended by any of these criteria that we need to, I think they're good, that we have to make those findings in order to protect the neighborhoods. So that's what I'm all right with it.
And I gotta go, these are all the things, when you look at them individually, and the grandfather we separate from, these are all the same conversations that we have every time we look at them. How many, where's the map? We turn to planning staff and go, where is your map? How many are there? What does this street look like? What does the parking look like? Well, the guy just paved his whole driveway, his whole front yard, so that's not aesthetically pleasing. Somebody wants to gravel or put dirt in theirs, or they're bumping over curbs and stuff. All that's doing is saying, hey, look, if you can meet your parking requirement, or we can help you meet your parking requirement, can we do it aesthetically pleasing? How's the landscaping look? The occupancy is basically, we don't want, does it meet the requirements of what everybody else is doing on the street? Do you have 50 people in your house, or do you have 11 people in your house that is reasonable to be in their bedrooms? And are they, and what's wrong with number 4? SDRs are a needed, I'm just curious, resource in certain areas of the city, particularly those in close proximities to venues. And part of that was because we don't have, Old Beach is 3 blocks from our resort. We got thousands of hotel rooms right there. So it's not as if people are landing in 27th Street and they can't find a room. That's not the problem. That statement, if I recall correctly, part of that was due to the fact that the amphitheater and the sports complex where we don't have hotels was so that then we could look at that area and say, yeah, in fact, they do need SDRs there because these families are bringing all these kids in to play these sports and stuff, and we don't have any place for them to stay, and the resort hotels are too far for them to go. Yes.
Yeah, okay.
I'm just.
Oh, I understand, but I'm gonna break it down. 2 and 3 I could probably live with, but 1 I definitely couldn't. What's to say that my way I think of characteristics change of a neighborhood is different than yours? As Mr. Redmond brought up earlier, 2 houses on there are different than what I think for characteristics of a surrounding neighborhood. And I know you keep bringing this up, but I think we have to, hotels are just because there's hotels there doesn't mean people want to stay in a hotel. I don't want to stay in a hotel. Anywhere I go, I'd rather stay in a house. And that's just my opinion, of course. So it's hard. The proximity of the venues and districts and areas generate high volume. That's perfect for Old Beach, in my opinion. So I could live with 1 and 4, or 2 and 3 rather. How's that? Compromise.
I'm not. Yes, Dave.
Not 4? I would make the following argument. Characteristics of the surrounding neighborhood. If there is a neighborhood with a preponderance of short-term rentals, I would argue that that is a characteristic of the neighborhood. if you look at some of these neighborhoods and say they've got all these dots on the map, look how many short-term rentals on there. Is that not fundamentally a characteristics of the neighborhood? If I'm one of these builders and I come up with an application and my application is denied on the basis that it changes the characteristic of the neighborhood where there is already a preponderance of short-term rentals, I'm going to sue. I mean, that just strikes me as oxymoronic, and really needs a lot more work. It's just kind of made up, and it doesn't. Again, I'm not going to support this grandfather thing because I think it's unfair to people who own things. But that, to me, is probably the most offensive of the things that I find here. I completely agree with you, Dee, about the attractiveness of things. The aesthetics to stuff, to me, makes a gigantic difference. In fact, I think we have to look much more carefully at parking, not just at the attractiveness of it, but how are we getting into, which is my problem with this 9x18 thing, is we're requiring far larger parking and more impervious cover than we ought to. And I think that's a much deeper, more complicated conversation than we have, because I don't want all this, I'd much rather not have all this more impervious stuff. And frankly, people move their cars to let the other car out all the time. Not everything needs a big wide turning radius of a Chevy Tahoe. So in any event, number one to me is a non-starter. It's not ready for prime time. It's easily argued, in my view, that in a lot of these places where there is already a preponderance of short-term rentals, that is a characteristic of the neighborhood. So I'm not exactly sure how you, even on a subjective basis, that makes sense. Anyway, I'm sorry, go ahead.
Well, then number one would be okay with you, because you get to make that argument saying, you're not changing the nature of the neighborhood, so it's okay.
But that's my point is, it doesn't have any real meaning. If everybody can see it 18 different ways, then it's not really a law.
I think that's the whole purpose of it, is that I don't think that,
The purpose of it is not to have meaning?
No. I don't think the lack of, and I'm not saying you as in specifically, I think
that's okay too.
Some people are looking for specific black and white laws regarding this, and I think it's subjective to where we are and what the area looks like. Do I think that a lot of the development in Old Beach is a plus to that area? Absolutely. I think that it is absolutely gorgeous to go down there after growing up and down on the ocean front and see that these places are pushed to the street, that we actually have sidewalks for once. We never had sidewalks. That the walkability, the balconies, the parking in the back, it's all a huge plus for that. Again, it's subjective to, then all of a sudden we have another area that has some not so well-run Airbnbs that aren't properly managed by a property management or that a company that is readily available to troubleshoot areas, that's causing problems, that allows us to go in and say, this is ruining the character of this particular area, this particular neighborhood. This is an enhancement to this particular area, this particular neighborhood.
I'll give an example, like areas on the bay. You know where that is? Very dense, very dense. Probably aren't any short-term rentals, many in there. But do you want to allow a bunch of short-term rentals in there? They're not used to having short-term rentals. They probably don't want short-term rentals. So there's certainly a right to have some, but it could become such that it's now changing the nature of that neighborhood. The nature of that neighborhood is not short-term rental. So, this allows that kind of analysis.
I understand that. My view is laws ought to have meaning or they're bad laws. And this doesn't have enough meaning to me. If you can interpret it 18 different ways, then I don't know how you can follow it. I mean, they have to be more specific. And in this case, it seems to me entirely, just like we had to do it the first time, entirely rushed. And, that's how you end up with a mess. And we had one before, we still have it. Largely, it's that rush part. But coming up with with phrases like change the characteristics of the surrounding neighborhood that don't really have any great definition to me is just asking for trouble.
So go down, I'm just throwing this out there, because I'm just trying to
Yeah, no, this is a great discussion,
No,
by
I
the way.
just
mean,
want to
really
figure
am-
this out.
I
So we
think this
go,
is-
let's just say we head down to Princess Anne, out to the rural area.
Right.
All of a sudden, we've got venues that want to go in and do all this, and everybody's like, no, because that changes the character and the fabric of that particular area of what it's technically designed to be. So the zoning is ag. This is what we want this part of our city to respond and act like. Now we go into a residential area, which people go in and buy a house, and I'm just playing devil's advocate.
Yeah.
We go into a residential area, people move here, the military moves here, women are looking for schools, they're looking for a neighborhood. They go, okay, here it is. This is where we're going to go for the next 2 or 3 years. We're going to buy a house, this, that, and the other. And then all of a sudden they find, well, it's not a residential area. We've got a commercial use in a residential area that typically wouldn't be. And I'm not talking about what is within 3 or 4 blocks of the oceanfront. I'm just talking about further into the city, further back. How does that perform? I mean, do we then just kind of say, you know, we can go down to the farms and we can do what, you know, because that doesn't change I'm just.
Well, let me answer you, and that is, it's far more specific than this is. Take his example about the wedding venue that we've been through, and we're going to see again, of course. And the ordinance, as I understand it, we haven't seen it yet, but the ordinance that's being drafted says, you know, assembly uses are not permissible in the ag district. Is that correct?
It's being negotiated now.
Okay, but, so let me use that as an example. That's pretty easy to understand. And it's pretty easy to point to. It's not as broad, you know, and as meaningless as change the characteristics of the surrounding neighborhood. I know what an assembly use is. I know what AG1 is. I can point to that and tell you whether it is or it isn't, you know, an assembly use.
So would you
And
say
so
that?
it's, I mean, you know, I understand your example, but you kind of are helping me make that argument, which is, that's much more specific. I understand what he's saying. I understand what the opposition, what the applicant who's proposing that particular application, and it's pretty clear, you can just make a decision because it has meaning. This doesn't have any meaning to me because it's just so unspecific. I don't like that we're messing with people's property rights in this grandfather thing, but that whole phrase about changing the character, it's just not there. It's just not good enough for me. So, I mean, we're just going to disagree on this. I understand.
No, I'm
that,
just asking. So
But I
would
mean,
you-
I don't know that it has, it just
Because
doesn't.
The only reason why I'm asking, David, is because at one point, we're going to have to be more specific. And so while we were just on the roll, I just basically, so you had Mr., what was his name? Mr. Growth Mall, who said, well, then let's do it by a math problem. You measure each street, and 2/3 of it's residential, and I'm just throwing it
Yeah,
out
I know,
there.
I know,
And 1/3 of it
I don't like that, but I see what you're saying.
STRs. And then therefore, now you basically have a math problem. Now you have law. Or something that appears to be more cut and dry.
You got a box you can check. When you figure
Yeah,
out that
thank you.
percentage, you got a box you can
That's
check.
it.
And when
You're
you get
full.
all your boxes checked, you can go with it. But this is not that direct.
Right.
This
So-
is not that direct. Is a lot of subjectivity to those 4 comments there.
It's
And-
altogether too much
Yeah.
objectivity.
And really what it boils down to is can you take those 4 things and get 6 votes? That's what it amounts to. Now, putting all aside, so it's a lot of subjectivity. I kind of agree with what David said about the 2 years. I wouldn't mind going to the 5 years on that deal. But the other ones is a lot of subjectivity because it gives you a lot of points that you can discuss like we're doing right now. But do you want to have a 3-hour discussion on each one to see if you can muster up enough support to get it either passed or not passed? You know, is what it amounts to. And I'm gonna say one thing about the talks we've had today. I got more out of the people that spoke today than any short-term rental briefing that I've been through by the people.
I can't
mean,
agree more.
There's
Can't
a
agree.
lot taking place, And we kind of predicted that this was gonna happen, back when we first started, but we were thinking maybe in going into other established neighborhoods, not really thinking about the beach or whatever, but we were thinking that blighted homes would be purchased and people would take them and either remodel them or build a new home there and do short-term rentals in there as a business. And that's what's happening at the beach now, is what's happening. And not necessarily blighted, but other property, older properties. And it's really enhanced that area, what it looks like to me from the pictures I've seen today. And I think a couple of y'all said something about it, and I really agree that today's comments and what we've heard has been the best that I've heard. So maybe our ordinance isn't too far out of line. Maybe we are getting something accomplished with what we've got now, other than a few little tweaks that probably need to be,
I agree with you. I think the comments today were outstanding.
You know what that boils down to? Is having the ordinance in place for a little while. And we're rushing to try and figure this out. We need to let it go a little bit longer. Maybe we need to let this go till November. Let the summer finish. And then let's work on it over the winter for next year. I mean, we haven't had this go long enough. We don't know what's happening yet.
I think, the one thing I think that we didn't anticipate was the number. The volume of applications that was gonna come in. I don't think that was anticipated, that volume.
Do we have the option of deferring it? Ms. Wilson?
It has to be returned to city council within 100 days.
All right.
So you can defer it for the next 30 days to your September meeting if you wish to.
I was
Say
gonna.
something? Can I say something? If we defer it, okay, this is just me, okay? We're gonna be together for the next 4 weeks, every Tuesday night for the next 4 weeks. We have no time to think about this.
I know. I'm just gonna say that
You
I
know-
was supporting number 19.
Okay.
But, and with number 2, with all the findings, comments, but I do like your 60 months, so. I don't know if I can do a substitute motion, or an amendment to your motion, but I would prefer to leave the
I haven't made a
findings.
motion yet.
Wait.
I thought you did.
Yeah, I said I would make a motion.
Oh,
if
I'm
you did
sorry.
this.
I didn't hear you. What'd you say? You liked,
I like the whole number.
The whole thing.
Yeah, the whole thing, but I actually, if he wants to say 60 months, I'm good with that.
I'm good with that too. I mean, I'll do that.
Can we take out 1 and 4?
No, I want to leave it.
I'm gonna leave 1 and 4,
I'm leaving them.
because I think it's fine.
It gives us-
It's gonna
Man, y'all put me on a spot.
I'll second.
Yeah,
Okay.
Whitney
That was
wants
a
to say-
motion.
yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Whitney wants to say something.
I'm sorry.
I agree with 2 of 3 and 2 of 2 and 3 of 2, but I don't agree with 1. One is poorly written, it's very subjective. It sounds like to me that a lot of Old Beach, the characteristic of it is short-term rentals and rental properties. Number 4 is just, to me, I don't know. I don't think it was written very well. I don't think it was well thought out. But I would support Mr. Wiener's idea of the 5 years for number 1 for the grandfathering, and then on number 2 and 3, but not number 1 and 4.
I think it's, George put the motion on for 5 years and then adding all the rest.
But, we can sit here and look at number 1 and we can say, well, Old Beach does have the characteristics of short-term rentals, so we should approve all of them there.
Well, the problem is I agree, but then somebody else could interpret it maybe differently.
Exactly.
It's just poorly written.
It's not right.
We do it right now. Mr. Redmond made a motion in Bayside due to the density there. I think it was a short-term one. There was a lot of density. It was on Shore Drive, one of them we didn't do because of the amount of,
I'll tell you exactly what it was. I'll characterize it rather than you if you care to.
No, go
There was
right
a
ahead.
cluster of 4 homes. Of those 4 homes, 1 was a short-term rental. Someone wanted to do another short-term rental so that 2 of the 4 would be short-term rentals. That's 50% in a 4 cluster of homes. And one of the owners who didn't own a short-term rental had particular problems with one that was there. My concern at the time was that that's probably going to exacerbate that. Now, that's going from 25 to 50%, where 25 was a problem. That, to me, is a lot more definable than change the characteristics of the surrounding neighborhood. And I could easily quantify that, and did, in the course of that application. So I don't think, it's not going to change my view. I mean,
No, I just-
I just don't think this is right. Let me tell you what I'm going to do, because we got 19 different options here. I don't like anything in number 2. I don't like the grandfathering at all. I think what David has proposed is an improvement.
We have a motion on the
I would
floor.
support David's, but I'm not going to support the other one. So,
Well, right now,
Oh,
with what?
okay.
Right now, we've got a motion on the floor.
David, did you make a motion?
No,
George made a motion.
I made a motion.
So you didn't make a motion to, I thought
I
you
made a
did.
motion that agenda number 18 be approved with the change of 60 months. And as far as the findings amendment, that they all stick. I like it because I think it puts more work on the builders, the applicants, to do what they can to make this work for them, so we can prove it. That's why I like it.
Do I have a second?
I second.
Okay. We're going to call
Sure.
for the question, please.
If you're in favor of the motion, say yes, and if you're opposed, say no. Mr. Akaras?
Yes?
Mr. Graham?
No.
Mr. Horsley?
No.
You said no?
No.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Inman?
Yes.
Ms. Klein?
Yes.
Mr. Redmond?
No.
Mr. Weiner?
No.
Ms. Oliver?
Yes.
It's like 4. By recorded vote of 4 and 4 against, agenda item 19 has hereby been denied.
That motion has failed.
Motion.
That motion has
It
failed.
failed because it's,
You have,
So, can I make a motion for a motion to pass?
Hold on.
Well, it'd be 4-4 again, probably.
No.
I mean,
Okay.
I would make a motion for item number 19, for item 1 to be 5 years, and for item number 2, recorded findings, to strike 1 and 4, and keep 2 and 3.
I second that motion.
You want to call for the question, Marshall?
sure, give me 1 second.
Sure. Pen and paper's killing us.
I know.
Whitney, I said, Whitney Graham.
And Graham second, right?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, if you're in favor of this motion, say yes. If you're opposed, say no. Mr. Alcaraz?
No?
Mr. Graham?
Yes.
Mr. Horsley?
Yeah.
Mr. Inman?
No.
Ms. Klein?
Yes.
Mr. Redmond?
No.
I used to know all of it. Okay.
Mr. Weiner?
Yes.
And Ms. Oliver?
No.
It's 4-4 again.
This is 4-4. By recorded vote of 4, 4, and 4 against, agenda item 19 is hereby denied by the Planning Commission.
So this goes to council for 24
Or failed.
Correct.
2 years.
It goes,
So we didn't do anything.
it goes recommended, so as it stands, it goes recommended for denial by the planning commission.
The minutes will tell them what we think, right?
They'll read it.
They'll be a verbatim.
Yeah.
Okay, well, where are we? We have 20. We're not done yet. Okay,
Mr. Redmond's got something together. Or Mr. Inman.
so we are on number 20, which is to allow certain short-term rentals as permitted use in the Old Beach Overlay District. Do you have anybody that has anything? Comments? Or a motion?
One thing, yeah, I'm just glad we got an updated map. That helps. And with the comments that we got from, I guess, some of these developers or builders, I appreciate what they said, and I've also appreciated what they've done, from what it looked like then and what it looks like now. And having said that, I don't know how So OR is, let me understand this, OR is not in our, it's not.
Not an old
okay.
beach.
Not an old beach.
That is correct.
I wasn't aware of this, but everything, as some of the builders said, west of, or east of Baltic has got that apartment or rental zoning. And they're actually, some of them are offering to take that as the overlay. And then maybe everything west of that would be a use permit. So I kind of support that. It kind of says it right on the map.
Yes, mine.
I support what George said mostly, but it would be if you're west of Baltic, if it's zoned a multifamily, then that wouldn't require principal use. So, principal, so that would be available without having being a principal residence. If it's zoned A12 or is it any other A zoning west of Baltic.
Can I ask an operational question
Yes.
here?
Absolutely.
STR is principal residence and owned by the operator. How in practice does that work? I'm the principal. It's my principal residence. That means I live there
More than half the year.
more than half the year. So like Dee's family, I'm going to kick my family out, and I continue to chuckle about, by the way.
Go ahead.
I'm going to move out
I'll take
for
it.
whatever, 4 months or 5 months or 6 months and then rent it, but I'm going to go back for part of the rest of the year. Okay, thank you.
And you can only have one.
So what was it, redefine that, the line, which you're talking about?
Okay, Baltic Avenue is the primary line. East Baltic Avenue, it wouldn't have to be a
Robin's
principal
doing her thing
residence.
again.
If it's west of Baltic Avenue and it's zoned for
Vanna.
multifamily use, would not require a principal resident.
So
I don't understand.
can I make, based on what you're saying, Mr. Inman, it may be easier to just say, in the Old Beach overlay, are you trying to say that they can apply for a conditional use permit still? Or are you trying to say that they can still apply? So then, it would be more uniform to say in the Old Beach overlay, anything zoned multifamily can still apply for a conditional use permit, while everything else zoned, because you're talking about the apartment zonings, correct?
Yes.
Okay, so, while everything else has to meet this criteria, that makes it very difficult for us, so. Because, based on the overlay district, you are permitted to have, single-family zoning, or single-family uses on the multifamily properties, which is why they're getting redeveloped in that fashion, so, I think we're having a bit of a hard time trying to understand kind of the change, unless you want to make the bright line on Baltic only and not anything else. I mean,
That's fine.
So anything west of Baltic would have to have those requirements. And east of Baltic, what would you do?
By right,
Make it by right.
yes.
Okay.
By right or conditional use permit?
By
By-
right with the provisions of 241.2?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, that'd be the ordinance, by the,
Yeah.
like Sandbridge
Yeah.
is, really.
Okay.
okay,
So
East of Baltic would be by right.
And would that be the west side, not to get into the nitty-gritty, but I think we say,
right there.
I think we would say that the west side of, sorry, you said close, I forgot what the mass thing. So the west side of Baltic, this side, east.
One of the speakers made it, I caught that too, but it would be the address of Baltic Avenue.
Yeah,
West.
I like that. That makes it simple.
That kind of fills the blank. It's not half the street, west. It's because you got property that's on the west side of Baltic Avenue that's on Baltic Avenue address.
Right,
So-
but we'd run the line down the middle of the street.
No, I don't, that's not.
Not down the middle of the street.
That's
Tell
not
me
what,
where
we'd
you
use-
want to run the line.
addresses on Baltic Avenue.
West.
so it's the,
Then it would be, okay, time out.
I'm not sure I can do
Okay, so it would
Sure, I
be,
can do that. I can
it's
do
gonna-
anything
it
you
would
want.
have to be, if this is Baltic, it would have to be the back of the property line along here that you're gonna run it. If you're, I mean, you can't run it down the middle of the street just because, I mean, it's, what's the difference between one side of the street and the other?
One side wouldn't. You're still gonna
So you're on the wrong
I mean, it's a busy street. I mean, I don't really,
What?
Any property that fronts on Baltic Avenue.
that's what I agree with Mr. Holmes.
Those to be east or west?
West.
No, west. Those to be west. Any
What?
property that fronts Baltic.
Okay, I'm lost. I'm sorry, guys, I'm having. a-
Everything on Baltic Avenue East would be by right, is what I'm saying.
So the west side of Baltic Avenue.
Yeah.
West side of Baltic Avenue would be by right. Correct.
With the meeting the provisions of 241.2.
Yes.
Correct.
Okay. Okay.
What'd you say, George? Do you mind repeating that?
On the east side of Baltic, Baltic is the dividing line. Anything fronting Baltic Avenue
Correct.
is going to be east. Okay?
So now we need the
And then the
north and south.
west
Oh, okay, go ahead.
would be that.
Correct. That's correct.
That, she says, as she points to the screen. Okay?
Great job.
Just stand there for a few minutes.
Get a
Stand there
video,
for a few minutes.
get a video of that.
I got it.
Oh, we ought to double your pay today.
Well, basically, it's all OR anyway.
Get two
Yeah, and
sandwiches.
then, Mike, did
It all
you
falls under.
bring
form-based
north, south? How far north, south?
Let's just leave it in
Well,
the.
it's just
the way to
it's
the
just
park.
the east, Old Beach,
Okay.
what's in blue.
Yeah,
Yeah,
just finish the overlay.
because we already determined that 22nd Street was OR anyway.
Because it's, yeah, it's surrounded by OR anyway.
Okay.
All right. Yes, ma'am.
Are we keeping the provision about the multifamily homes that are west or east, or was that,
No,
No.
that's separate? Okay.
separate. Yes, ma'am.
One more time.
Is there a motion?
You got a motion?
Somebody make a motion?
George? I'm sorry if I'm sounding confused. So we're not going north or south? We're just staying
don't-
in Old Beach? I thought we were,
No, because
Gets too complicated.
those two streets that you're probably referring to are not in Old Beach. 21st and 22nd Street are not in Old Beach.
Right, that's okay.
okay.
That's OR.
Thank you.
So you're just looking at the rest of the overlay, which is basically encompasses everything. I think I actually have a map here, George. Hold on.
All right, so I was saying that everything, I'm lost. How do we end up saying for Baltic?
Okay.
Fronting on Baltic,
If you're fronting
east,
on Baltic, you are considered to be east.
east, but,
You're considered to be part of the east.
Thank you.
East is by right, as long as you meet the provisions of 241.2. The west will allow STRs by right also, but you have to meet 241.2, and it has to be your principal residence.
Oh, here, this
What
is
she
a better
said.
one.
I agree.
But
he didn't write it.
This actually has all the zoning on it.
Okay.
So,
Yeah.
there it is.
Somebody second it.
Do we have a second?
A second.
Yeah. Okay. Michelle? Can you involve for the question?
Did I get a second?
I did.
Okay, thank you.
Okay.
All right, if you're in favor of the motion, say yes. If you're opposed, say no. Mr. Alcaraz?
Yes.
Mr. Graham?
Yes.
Mr. Horsley?
Yes.
Mr. Inman?
Yes.
Ms. Klein?
Yes.
Mr. Redmond?
Yes.
Mr. Weiner?
Yes.
Ms. Oliver?
Yes.
By recorded vote of 8-4 and 0 against, agenda item 20 is hereby approved by the planning commission with the changes noted.
You did pretty good if you got rid
We all agreed on something.
I didn't think it is.
What?
This next one's easy.
You got Redmond's vote
Don't
that time.
say that.
No, we got to
I
prove it.
didn't like it.
Nothing goes unfit.
I held my nose, man.
I know.
You held your
Held my nose.
Okay.
Almost passed out.
Almost here. 21, transition rules for Old Beach overlay, STR reviews. Okay. Yes, Robin.
I would like to make a motion that we approve the ordinance as written.
Second.
Do you have a second? We have a second by Mr. Inman.
Use one.
Marshall, please call for the question.
All right, if you're in favor of this motion, say yes. If you're opposed, say no. Mr. Alcaraz?
Yes.
Mr. Graham?
Yes.
Mr. Horsley?
Yes.
Mr. Inman?
Yes.
Ms. Klein?
Yes.
Mr. Redmond?
Yes.
Mr. Weiner?
Yes.
Ms. Oliver?
Yes.
By a recorded vote of 8-4 and 0 against, agenda item 21 is hereby recommended for approval by the Planning Commission.
Made it just under the wire.
Madam Chair, that was the last item on the agenda. The recording of this meeting will be posted on the Planning Commission's webpage within 10 days. That website is bbgov.com/PC. The applications not deferred or withdrawn will be scheduled for a future city council meeting. Staff will let the applicants know when that will be, and those dates will be posted on the Planning Commission's webpage. Madam Chair?
Right, thank you. I'd just like to thank everybody for coming today and participating in today's Planning Commission meeting. And if there's nothing left to be addressed by our planning director,
No, ma'am.
we are adjourned.